Chapter 49:06. Immediately afterwards, a series of sore bone cracks sounded. The broken immortal body guarding outside the temple gate moved at this moment. Without exception, they are all dead immortals without their own consciousness, just like corpses. Click. The headed dead fairy seemed to have fallen for a long, long time, and almost only the fairy bones were left. And it could be said that there was no fighting power. Jian Wushuang walked in the forefront, and with a direct wave of his hand, he wiped out the dead immortal who dared to step forward, leaving no trace. But in an instant, all the more than 10 dead immortals disappeared. This huge temple, based on the infinite Black Mountain Range, is the center of this treacherous universe, and it is also the most deadly place. Fengshan then stepped forward, guarded Jian Wushuang, rushed directly into the giant hall, and then began to wreak havoc. He smashed a few large holes on the roof of the temple, and a dim light came in, barely seeing the scene in the temple. The hall is old, and the ground and walls under the feet are covered by crimson blood veins, just like an azure field. And the blood tendons are like living creatures creeping slowly. Something that pretends to be a ghost. "Grandpa will kill you," Fengshan said solemnly, between the opening and closing of his palms. A giant say-like power poured out and exploded directly in this hall. A bad premonition suddenly rose in Jian Wushuang's heart, but before he even had time to give aid, Fengshan was in deep crisis. The sudden change, a total of tens of millions of blood veins, like a prey smelling blood, all revived, and the sky was covered by the sun to catch it. Yanli was swallowed by countless blood tendons, and then he was entangled in blood tendons and dragged into the abyss. Jian Wushuang slashed out with a single sword, only severing thousands of blood veins, and ultimately failed to stop it. Without any hesitation, he flew directly to the depths of the giant hall. Xu Yang's heart also shuddered, and then he followed Jian Wushuang closely. He couldn't tell why he wanted to make this move. He just left by feeling. The huge hall was dilapidated, and there was an abyss in the deepest part of the sky where even light could not penetrate into it. Numerous blood veins as thick as a real dragon entangled each other in the abyss to the extreme. Jian Wushuang held an invisible sword, and Xuanhe divine marks flowed all over his body, making it impossible to approach any filth. This abyss seemed to have no end, as if at the other end of the heaven. Boom! The rubble splashed, and 2 blood tendons that were several times stronger than the real dragon were chopped to the ground, twisting frantically. Immediately afterwards, a figure with a god-patterned figure holding a long sword appeared, followed by Xu Yang, holding a silver spear. Under this abyss, there is a vast dojo. No light can shine here. It is very strange. In the center of this vast dojo, Jian Wushuang saw that a huge futon made of flesh and blood was slowly creeping. This huge futon is actually made up of dead immortals, and at a glance there are no fewer than hundreds of them. At the same time, on this futon, the black-robed immortal Yuyan was sitting on it, with a haggard face staring at Jian Wushuang bitterly. This seat miscalculated. This seat should not lead the wolf into the room and drag you into my heaven, he said viciously. Jian Wushuang glanced at him obliquely and said coldly, "Stop talking nonsense. Put him back. I will spare your life." Yuyan suddenly stood up from the futon, his collapsing eye sockets bursting with red light. "Are you really sure you will take me? I can kill you the first time, and naturally I can kill you the second time. Do you still want to try?" Jian Wushuang's eyes gradually became cold. "Let's try that seat today. If you win me, I will return him to you." Yuyan shouted loudly, his arms shook, and immediately a blood vein with a thickness of 1,000,000 feet emerged from the dark, and Fengshan's figure was firmly fixed at the top of the blood tendons, unable to move at all. Yuyan still wanted to speak, but Jian Wushuang obviously didn't want to talk nonsense and directly lifted his sword towards him. He was shocked and hurriedly manipulated the infinite lifelessness to respond. Kacha, kacha! The ground shattered, and suddenly huge claws protruded from the ground, all of them madly grabbing at Jian Wushuang. Upon seeing this, Xu Yang hurriedly picked up the silver spear in his hand to clear the way for him. Wushuang Kendo, Zingeho Heijianyani, the first style. Star. The lofty and magnificent sword intent gathers in the front line. The momentum is like the sky, directly cut forward. The sword intent broke out completely, and countless on pillars burst along the way, shattering the giant claws protruding from the ground. This sword is the sword with the highest burst of group damage, and can easily wipe out the threat. Yu Yun was shocked. The sword intent that suffocated him struck again, and he was forced to shoot. Standing on the high futon, he put his hands together, and then suddenly opened. Swallow! In an instant, the futon under his feet squirmed. All the overlapping dead immortals struggled painfully, all opened their mouths, forming a peculiar suction. Under this suction force, that sword intent was directly divided and eaten. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, and he felt unusual. Xu Yang came behind him and said solemnly, "The futon sitting on Yuyun has a problem and can swallow all damage." He nodded, not eager to do it. At this time, Fengshan, who was hung on the blood, yelled anxiously, "My lord, go quickly, don't stay here. There is a problem with this old thing." Without finishing a sentence, Yu Yin directly stretched out his hand to release a mass of blood and knocked him out. "It's really noisy." Then Yu Yun gave a weird smile, and his figure suddenly disappeared in the air. Upon seeing this, Xu Yang's complexion changed drastically, and Chao Jian Wushuang leaned forward without a trace. Between Yan Xian and Dian Xian, it is like being separated by a moat, not to mention that Yu Yun is such an extremely tricky Dian Xian. You reading www.akayanshu.com. It can be said that as long as Yu Yun moves the killing mind, even though the sun is invincible in the same realm, it can only be honestly to die, let alone confront it. Regarding this, Xu Yang, who was naturally aloof, had no doubts, so he went directly to Jian Wushuang. This is also the realm of evolving immortals, even the enemy's evolving immortals, but now it gives him a great sense of security. This is the home of this seat. This seat is the eternal way of heaven. No one can hit me hard. Now, with a pious belief become my nourishment, you are enough to make me break through again. As the voice of Yu Yun resounded in this abyss dojo, the huge futon composed of dead immortals also moved at this moment. Every dead fairy wailed in pain, as if they had suffered the most painful punishment before they fell completely. Endless death aura escaped in the center of this dojo, and then the huge futon moved, and all the dead immortals opened their blood-red eyes. Chapter 49:07. Dead immortals are not enough to be fearful. They are not even tricky to develop immortals in the same state, because in the final analysis, they are just the scum left by union swallowing the fairy source, and they are slaves without any perception. But the power of the futon made up of so many dead immortals should not be underestimated. They wailed together, then soared into the air, flying towards Jian Wushuang. At the same time, an infinite force of suction converged from the four wilds, devouring everything madly. Even Jian Wushuang felt a little discomfort. This huge dead fairy futon is really a bit tricky, and he immediately released an ancestral technique to deal with it. The ancestral technique, the heavenly gate, is extremely sacred. The vast expanse of power burst out, and countless gods flew out from the heavenly gate, one after another, descending infinite magnificence. At this moment, all the dead immortals in the dead immortal futon raised their heads, and then opened their mouths to devour Yanli. Ling Jian Wushuang was a little surprised. This type of heavenly gate was so frightening that it was completely swallowed. At this point, the dead immortal futon was already extremely large and wailed at him again. Shuiyang's complexion changed drastically, and he had already prepared to fight to the death. However, Jian Wushuang took a step ahead of him and went straight forward, the invisible sword in his hand shining to the extreme. In the next moment, the incomparable sword intent illuminates the entire dojo under the abyss. An unremarkable sword pierced out, and only this sword was left in Jian Wushuang's calm eyes. The two collided. There was no shocking scene, and there was not even any loud noise. This unremarkable sword is an absolute sword, the strongest one. No one can stop it. The dead fairy futon, which was originally full of extremes, exploded, exploding countless pieces of limbs. Under this sword, the dead fairy futon dissipated. Xu Yangyuan opened his eyes and looked at Jian Wushuang's back in disbelief. A big question was born in his heart. The same as Yan Xian. Why is the difference so big? After beheading the dead immortal futon, Jian Wushuang went straight to Fengshan unabated. He wanted to save him. However, the sudden change, the ghost cloud that had disappeared, quietly appeared at this moment, looking at Jian Wushuang with a smile. "Get away!" he shouted sharply, and the long sword in his hand slashed directly towards Yu Yun. Wow! Under this sword, Yu Yun's figure shattered directly, and then turned into two. "Fool! You are just a trivial immortal. You want to kill me in my heaven in vain?" Jian Wushuang ignored him and continued to slash. With each of his slashes, Yu Yun's figure would shatter, but another one would fissure soon afterwards, and soon there were nearly 100 Yu Yun surrounding Jian Wushuang. "Danger! Run!" Seeing this scene, Xu Yang reminded in shock. However, it was too late. Nearly 100 Yu Yun all grinned and opened their palms, making a fatal blow. That was a full blow from Dying Immortal, and the infinite beam of death energy blasted Jian Wushuang from all directions at this moment. Boom! The entire Earth's abyss was completely turbulent, and even Xu Yang couldn't stand firm here, only barely blew himself up. This slaying lasted for a long time, until everything was calm. Then a body riddled with holes fell from the air and knelt on the ground. Divine blood, like a stream, flowed out of the broken body and infiltrated a large area of land. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, the immortal body, were all shattered to the extreme. If he went further, I am afraid that all his immortal bodies would be broken. After all, he was still careless, still underestimating Daixian's true strength. Even if Yu Yun is unbearable, he is a true Dayan immortal, able to easily give Jian Wu double wounds. But Jian Wushuang still hasn't passed that hurdle after all. When Xu Yang saw this scene, his complexion was extremely solemn, and then he quickly recovered his calm, holding a silver spear directly into the air to face Yu Yun. "Huh, you little heavenly official dare to stop me?" Yu Yun looked at him coldly. Xu Yang snorted coldly. "Yu Yun, remember, now is fighting the sixth heaven realm, not the time for you to be presumptuous. Can you control this seat? You are just an eagle dog under the seat of young Master Hua. Dare you to teach this seat?" Yu Yun shouted sharply, and he took a step forward, and the infinite pressure swept over. Xu Yang gritted his teeth, resisting this coercive force firmly, and suddenly pointed his spear at him. "Yu Yun, don't go too far. What if this seat is too much? Believe it or not, this seat will kill you now, and young Master Hua will not attack me." Yu Yun smiled, and a huge shadow emerged from behind. The hatred in Shuiyang's eyes was abrupt. "Then look at how you scumbag hurt this seat." Fierce fighting broke out in the air again, but it was one-sided. Yu Yun is like a cat catching a mouse, playing Xu Yang between applause. The insurmountable gap between Dai and Xian and Yan Xian made him take it easy. At this moment, Jian Wushuang was half kneeling on the ground, and the immortal body was recovering quickly, but it still took a while. He gritted his teeth. The broken fairy body began to give birth to granulation. Right here, an extremely weak but abrupt voice sounded from behind him. "You are in vain. He can't be killed at all." Jian Wushuang turned his head abruptly and saw a dead fairy with only his head crawling towards him. "Don't worry. I'm different from them. I haven't completely died yet. I have the last bit of consciousness." The head of this dead fairy is indeed different, and there are a pair of crystal eyes in the socket. I was one of the top repairers who had been tricked by him to come here earlier. Now they are all dead, but I am still alive. The reason why I still have the last trace of faith in living is because I have to inform the strong who can kill him about his weaknesses. Fortunately, I have waited. The head of this dead immortal came to Jian Wushuang's face, his eyes overflowing with expression. "What I know is that he does not have a body, but is in a ghost state, and all the offensives of the immortal against him can't completely kill him. But I know him completely. I have been enslaved by him, and I know his biggest secret. He doesn't have a body, but it is a phantom of a thing. I once saw him take out an ancient book, but now I think it must be his origin. If you can find that ancient book, you can completely destroy him." Jian Wushuang looked at him and asked after a moment, "Where is that ancient book?" "Under this dojo. It depends on whether you have destroyed the abilities here." The head slowly said, "Can you do it?" Chapter 4908. The immortal body has completely recovered, and the heavy damage that Yuyun can inflict on him is extremely limited after all, even far from the usual. So Jian Wushuang recovered quickly. After listening to the death fairy's head, Jian Wushuang said again, "Can you tell me the specific location?" "Of course, that ancient book should be under you. I hope you can destroy it. This is the last thing I can tell." The dead fairy's head gradually collapsed and finally turned into a handful of fly ash, disappearing. Jian Wushuang slowly got up. He watched the scene in the air and then condensed an invisible sword in his palm. The next moment, he drew a sword towards the ground. Boom! The collapse from the depths of the earth resounded. With a sword 1,000,000 feet, the entire Earth's core under the abyss was dug off by his sword. Yuyun, who was about to slap Shu Yang with a palm, changed his face, and the next moment he went straight to Jian Wushuang. "Want to leave? I will never make you feel better, even if you die today." Shu Yang was covered in blood, holding a silver spear in front of Yuyun. "Trash things. You can't help yourself." Yuyun was furious and slapped him away directly, but then a tall figure resembling a peak stopped in front of him again, spitting fiercely. "Old beast, there is also the level of Grandpa." Yuyun was almost mad, facing Fengshan, directly releasing endless life. Fengshan and Shuyang only blocked his dozens of breath time, but it was the dozens of breath time that Jian Wushuang had won. Jian Wushuang almost dug the entire center of the earth, and under the deep and cold earth pole, a red light suddenly swept up, shining the entire Dyuan dojo. Yuyun's face was like dead ashes, and instantly rushed to the red light. However, it was too late. Jian Wushuang reached out his hand into the red light and took out something. No, do not want. He was terrified, but he dared not take a step forward. When the red light dissipated completely, a dilapidated ancient book fell into Jian Wushuang's hands. Reverse the Death Sutra. On this whole ancient book, there are only these 4 weird and curious fonts. Besides, there is nothing else. Give it back to me, and I will let you go." Yuyun shouted in horror. Jian Wushuang ignored him and opened the first page of the ancient book in his hand. The red light circulates, and the picture of an ugly ghost engraved on each page of the painting comes into view. Yuyun? Ghost? Could he be the ghost on the first page? he thought. However, Yu Yun couldn't wait any longer. He directly rushed towards Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore. He reached out his hand and tore off the first page of the Death Sutra. Damn you! Yu Yun was completely desperate, and his whole figure was instantly broken and clean, leaving no trace. At the same time, the endless death energy began to dissipate, and the entire Diyuan dojo began to collapse. Yu Yun's sudden death on the spot is simply unthinkable to the extreme. Everything happened so fast that even Jian Wushuang couldn't believe it. He just tore off the first page of this backward death sutra, and a dying immortal died like this? Jian Wushuang quickly recovered, looking at the page that was torn off by himself, only to realize that it had become a piece of yellow paper. Everything reversed too quickly. Yu Yun died suddenly on the spot, and the lifeless energy that supported this Diyuan Daochang also dissipated, and could no longer stay in Diyuan for a long time. Before he could think about what had happened, Jian Wushuang directly stuffed the ancient book into his arms, and then urged Fengshan to leave. "My lord, what should this guy do?" Fengshan wiped the nosebleed off his face and pointed to the almost non-human-shaped sun on the ground. Jian Wushuang did not speak. Saving this guy is equivalent to saving an enemy. But he didn't hesitate too much. He directly released Yanli to wrap it up, and then soared out of the abyss together. The endless death aura has dissipated, and the originally chaotic sky has returned to its original color. It's just that the earth is still yellow and dry, and it may take a long time to recover. As a Daangxian's dojo, this heaven is covered with bones, and countless Dingxiu and Yanxian have fallen here. Jian Wushuang originally intended to destroy this heaven directly, but after thinking about it, he didn't do anything. Yu Yun has completely fallen, and there is no possibility of recovery. The energy contained in the Reverse Death Sutra is probably beyond imagination. Jian Wushuang didn't intend to study it immediately. He still had more important things to do. Standing on the sky, the sun at this moment has almost recovered. Facing Jian Wushuang, he arched his hands heavily. "Thank you for your life-saving grace. Shuyang will not forget." Jian Wushuang waved his hand. "How is your recovery?" Shuyang said, "It's not bad. Already has the power to protect itself." "Can you return to your own heaven?" Hearing this, Shuyang didn't answer, and only said after a while, "Suyang has been defeated, and he no longer has the face to attack the six-day realm. He will immediately return to his own heaven and no longer set foot for 6 days. But before that, I will return to the six-day realm with you once, recall my subordinates, Yanxian, and no longer participate in this war." Jian Wushuang looked at him, somewhat puzzled. Shuyang smiled bitterly. "The reason why I did this is actually to redeem some losses. I now understand a little bit. With you, the six-day realm will be hard to be destroyed." Hearing the words, he nodded. "Yes, after you follow me to the battlefield, the subordinates will be recalled and leave immediately. I will not stop them." Shuyang nodded, and then, as if he had made some kind of decision, he asked tentatively, "Can you tell me your name?" After blurting out this sentence, Shuyang soon regretted it. You must know that the relationship between them is the enemy. Yuwu, Okanshu. Kam is simply a manifestation of ulterior motives. But Jian Wushuang didn't care about it. "Just call me Wushuang. This is my name." Fog Shuang. Shuyang repeated it in his heart, then solemnly arched his hands. "Brother Wu, I've written it down. If we meet again in the future, I will definitely invite you to swig." Jian Wushuang waved his hand again. "I don't have to drink it. I just hope to see you next time, not on the battlefield." Fengshan on the side grinned. "Even if we meet on the battlefield, I won't be able to meet each other on the battlefield. Then I will be in front of the adults and beat you down." Shuyang smiled bitterly. No one knew where they would meet next time. maybe it was really on the battlefield. Being involuntary is a true portrayal of being a great official. It has been a long time since Jian Wushuang was dragged into the fairy formation by Yu Yun and strayed into this heaven. The most urgent thing right now is to return to the 6-day battlefield to turn the tide. Chapter 49:09. The entire Void battlefield has been completely chaotic, and the war has spread to a large area of the sky, except the 6-day realm. Nearly 100 heavens have been destroyed in this battle. The boundless void is shattered, and Yanli mixed with the violent wind has almost turned this place into a purgatory. At this moment, the last 2 celestial formations were completely opened, and nearly 800 immortals besieged them for 6 days. Even Void couldn't bear the impact of so many immortals, and was fragmented. They all crushed to one place, crazy to the extreme. But what can be seen is that these more than 800 immortals and countless Dingxiu all gathered in front of the 6-day realm portal, no matter how hard it is to advance. It seems that they are caught in a fierce battle. Immortal evolving and batches of top repairers continued to fall, and the bones of immortals flowed miserably in the void, and then were crushed. In this catastrophe battle, there is the most dazzling figure. He has 10 wings on his back, and the color of each wing is different, releasing a terrible general trend. Every time he shot, he smashed the Yenxian who dared to go ahead into powder, and the entire 6-day realm was almost protected by his own power. By his side, there were fewer than 20 Yangxians left. With 20 to 800, this is unimaginable. Gong Ziqian was also forced to join this battle, and almost all of the 100 Yangxians he brought with him died. He was stuck in this battle and couldn't get out of it. At this moment, he almost wanted to slap his previous self fiercely. He thought he made this decision wisely, but he didn't know that he was heading for a dead end. If it hadn't been for the last line of defense, which was the protection of the truth, I'm afraid they would have fallen for hundreds of times. There are only less than 20 eternal immortals left. Chuanqiu, Qinqing, Cuijing, Zhao Ting, Wei Liujia, and others are already at the end of the battle. If they continue to fight like this, they will only have one end. All destroyed. There are more than 800 immortals, which is really terrible. You must know that even the most common immortals have the ability to destroy the heavens. They are all above the heavens, and they can even forge the existence of the heavens. Right now, they are gathered here, and no one can stop them. Daiking's life was damaged, and he used his own strength to resist the offensive of the 800 Yenxian, almost making him a little unable to support it. But he still persisted, persisting until that figure appeared. A few of us, let's go. The 6-day realm is no longer preserved. Gong Ziqian looked at Di Qing and said in a trembled voice. Di Qing coldly glanced at him, and then continued to lower his unparalleled momentum. After swallowing his throat, young Master Qian didn't dare to speak anymore. He could feel the killing intent in Di Qing's eyes, and he didn't care about the identity of his emperor. Thinking of this, he gritted his teeth and fought hard again. With Jian Wushuang's disappearance, the entire battlefield has reached the most chaotic and disorderly state. The little emperor stood in the void in despair. He has been besieged by nearly 100 Yenxian, and it is difficult to escape. But the immortals who besieged him, no one dared to step forward, hesitating in their eyes. Every immortal who came to this 6-day realm knew who this young man dressed in luxurious clothes with a handsome and gloomy face was. Because of this, no one dared to step forward. After all, he is the emperor's son under the seat of Zhenmuyang. Holding a soft sword in his hand, his gaze slowly swept across all the immortals in front of him, as if he wanted to write them down. At this moment, the void in front of him quietly curled up with layers of ripples, and then a black robe appeared suddenly. As soon as this black robe appeared, an aura that was too strong to be inspected escaped. That is the breath of Dian Immortal. Then he slowly stepped forward, stretched out his hand to directly hold Xiao Daijin's neck, and lifted him up. The son, Yen. The playful voice sounded from under the black robe, and then the hood was slowly pulled down, revealing an extremely old and skinny face. This extremely old Dayan, immortal, had no need to clean his face, and his eyes were muddy. Xiao Dijuan looked at him coldly, without any expression. Then Dayan Xian slowly said, "When you are dying, do you have anything else to say? Only you are worthy to kill me? Do you dare to kill me?" Zaya Adijin gave a dark smile, his eyes full of madness. "Old man, why don't you dare?" He also smiled, and his empty right hand suddenly released its power, which directly blasted on Xiao Daijin's fairy body. The immortal body shattered, and the blood spewed out, and a hideous wound was directly blasted into his belly. "Hurry up, old dog, you will do it again. I will see if you have the courage to do it again." There was no pain on Xiao Daijin's face, but he smiled grimly. "You don't kill me today, I will call you later. You have no way to survive, no way to die." The old Dayan Xian turned his turbid eyes to look at him. "You can't die now, and you need all the dust to settle. Then I will come to kill you myself." After saying this, he directly reached out and threw him down into the void, and then his body disappeared. The battle continued, and more than 800 immortal evangelists and countless top repairers had already wiped out the remaining forces in the six-day realm. Even the truth is clear. It is no longer able to turn the tide. Together, they are powerless. However, Di Qing clenched his teeth. His power of generative power was about to dry up, and when faced with the encirclement of more than 800 fairy, I am afraid that he might lose another true life. "Wushuang, where did you go?" His voice quickly spread to Chen Qing's ears. Chen Qing, who came back from Jian Wushuang, immediately said, "Brother Jian is going to destroy the immortal formation, but now it looks like I am afraid that something has happened." "Impossible. Brother Jian will be fine. He will be back soon." Chun Xiu was bloodied, but his tone was extremely firm. "A moment is a moment, and I will wait until Brother Jian comes back." Cui Jing gritted his teeth and said, "He has only entered the realm of immortals. His foundation is the most shallow, but he still persists." Di Qing didn't say much anymore. He also believed that Jian Wushuang would return soon, and the reason why he persisted until now was also waiting for Jian Wushuang. He shook the 10 wings behind him and lowered layers of golden light. Anyone who approached him would suffer severe damage, even if it was a fairy, but now it is gradually fading. Just when Di Qing was about to call out the treasure, a strong premonition suddenly rose deep in his heart. Being able to walk out of the era when Zhen Wuyang became the emperor, his divine consciousness has been so powerful that he can feel the danger coming from any direction. At the next moment, Di Qing did not hesitate. He directly released all his power, and the 10 wings behind his back also closed at the same time, protecting his fairy body for the first time. Chapter 49:10. The void shook suddenly. All Yanxian and Ding Xiu felt the void suddenly sticky at this moment. It's like time has stagnated for a moment. Then, a black light that could tear the void through the entire void battlefield at an unimaginable speed fiercely shot at the magnificent figure. As the heavens collapsed, the day withered. An extremely crisp cry resounded in the void battlefield. Daiking's treasures shattered directly, countless golden lights retreated from his immortal body, and the magnificent 10-party wings withered and shattered. All the immortals can be clearly seen, replaced by a huge wound at the heart of Di Qing immortal body. The ultimate pure golden blood gurgled out, and even the broken void was stained with color. Gang Ziqian, Chun Qing, Chuanqiu, Cui Jing, Wei Liujia, Zhao Ting, and others were all face ashes at this moment, and even the few remaining eternal immortals and the few thousand Dingxiu were desperate. every immortal yen, and even Ding Xiu knew that the reason why they were able to persist until now was because they had a clear existence. Right now, Di Qing was hit hard, and everything finally came to an end. Ahem! He coughed out a ray of golden blood. Di Qing breathed and languid. His eyes began to tire, and then he could no longer hold it and fell into the void. Chun Xiu was the first to react. He came to Di Qing in an instant, supported it, and took out a handful of Emperor Pin pills directly from his arms with one hand and put them directly into Di Qing's mouth. "Don't resist. Eat them all," Chun Xiu said with a trembling voice. The entrance of the Di Pin pill was directly transformed into a ray of light which penetrated into his body and began to quickly repair the severely injured place. Di Qing, who had almost died, was able to continue his life, and his aura calmed down. But he was still in a state of uncertainty, and it seemed that he could die at any time. The shattered void battlefield fell silent, and more than 800 immortals walked towards them silently like mountains and seas about to fall. The unspeakable aura almost left the six-day realm on the verge of collapse. Immediately afterwards, an old black-robe figure appeared in front of the army of immortals who covered the sky. He walked slowly, satisfaction in his muddy eyes. The old man didn't expect that in this small void battlefield, there is actually a 9-rank Dayan immortal. What made the old man not even expecting was that the old man beheaded and killed a rank 9 Dayan immortal with his own power. When he said this, his muddy eyes were full of arrogance. This is indeed a kind of glory. He is only a mere rank 3 Dayan immortal, and he was able to kill a rank 9 Dayan immortal. This incident will be his most glorious battle. Chun Qing took a step forward slowly, looking at him with a gloomy expression. A shameless person would actually do a sneak attack. Although you are a Dayan, you are not as good as a beast. Hearing the words, the old Mai Taiyan flicked his fingers directly. In an instant, Chun Qing's complexion changed, and his right arm holding the sword was directly crushed into powder. "You are a little Yenxian. Dare to clamor with this seat? No respect." He hummed coldly. Cui Jing stood up at the right time and looked at him proudly. The words were full of disdain. "I say something bad. You are only worthy of sneak attack. If you put it on the open face to fight, you can't get on the table at all." I don't know how many Huanyan old people who have not been angry. This time, they are completely angry. He didn't expect that these ants-like guys would dare to swear against him. How he was not ashamed. Looking for death. Old Maid Dayan directly flicked his fingers. Cui Jing was hit hard, and the Kikyo's blood was gushing at the same time. "Today, you have one count. None of you can live." After he finished speaking, he clicked with his fingers, and Chun Xiu, Zhao Ting, Wei Liujia, and others were all hit hard. The only Yenxian in the 6-day realm. At this moment, no one can get up. Dayanxian's suppression of Yenxian was really terrible. He just moved his fingers and caused Yenxian to be hit hard. No Yenxian can stand up, and the door to the 6-day realm is wide open. Old Maid Dayan had contempt in his eyes, and at the same time cast his gaze forward. He only needs to destroy all the 6-day realm, and the task is completed. Just as he was about to destroy for 6 days, the sudden change occurred. Facing the army of immortals leaning like mountains and seas, a thin Ding Xiu stepped out, then drew out the real sword hanging from his waist, and looked forward solemnly. Seeing such a scene, all Yanxians felt ridiculous, and even the old Dayanxian was astonished to the extreme. This is even a top repairer who has just reached the stage of entering Yen, dare to stop nearly 1,000 of Yenxian? It is as simple as crushing an ant to kill a Yenxian at random. But he still did not dodge and stood up resolutely, holding the hilt in both hands, the sharp blade pointed forward. This ordinary-looking, thin-shaped Ding Xiu is Su Jin. Seeing this ridiculous scene, the old Dayan Immortal seemed to be an interest, and he waved his hand directly, and suddenly the three top repairers who were also entering Yen flew out and stood in front of Su Jin. Su Jin took a deep breath, then stepped forward with a sword. One top repair and three top repairs. This is almost a suspenseless ending. But Su Jin stood alone and resolutely stood up. He was unable to retreat, and at the same time he knew his fate. In the next moment, the three Dingxiu set off at the same time, and several powerful training bursts from their hands, and then violently shot forward. The long sword pointed forward. Su Jin seemed to have entered a certain ethereal state, and even her breath disappeared. All Yangtzeans watched this farce-like scene jokingly, but the expected result did not appear. Combining the strength of the three top repairs, when hitting the target, it actually broke every inch. A careful Xian noticed that the violent force training was not broken by itself, but was shattered by dense sword intent. That sword repair is not easy. The three Dingxiu also noticed this change. Calm, but none of them took it seriously, and they all rushed towards Su Jin. The entire spectrum of Luyun grass sword style is composed of 9 styles, ranging from simple to complex. So far, only Jian Wushuang has cultivated to the ultimate, and Su Jin, who is dull and extremely poor in control of Yan Li, has only practiced the 3rd style so far. How powerful can the 3-style Luyun grass sword be? At this moment, Su Jin had long forgotten all the crises. He had only the sword in his eyes, and at the same time, he deduced kendo over and over again in his divine consciousness. Luyun grass sword, 1st style, Shuxing. This is the most basic sword that lays the sword intent of Luyun Chaojian in the whole spectrum, starting from simple to complex. True sword probing. The simplest crosscut is the meaning of staring. Void fluctuations, sword intent is brilliant. Chapter 49:11. The 3 top repairers who flew past felt bad at the same time. They backed away in a hurry, but they were still half a step late. Laugh. The sound resounded like tearing brocade and silk, and the void was opened with a long and narrow gap. The 3 backing Dingxiu all looked at him solemnly. At this moment, on the same place on their cheeks, there was a scarlet blood line, and blood dripping from the wound. An ordinary crosscut, causing all 3 Dingxiu to suffer. They all felt the palpitations of the sword intent, but they still couldn't avoid it. If they didn't stop in time, the consequences would not end there. Fucking, you are looking for death. One of the youngest, Dingxiu, was furious and rushed directly with a touch of blood on his face. Su Jin raised his brows and faced this surging top repair. He had no fear. Flowing cloud grass sword, the 2nd style. Consecutive months. The true sword slashed straight, and riding on the remaining power of the star restraint, the coldest sword burst out. That Dingxiu smiled sullenly, as if he had been prepared. His arms shook, and he directly covered a layer of force barrier around his body to deal with it. The next moment, the 2 collided, and Su Jin, who was thin, flew upside down, and even the real sword in his hand almost fell off. The Dingxiu stood frozen in place, laughing loudly. Cough, cough. Su Jin slowly straightened up, wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth, and looked at him calmly. When a shocking scene appeared, Dingxiu, who was still laughing out loud, suddenly shut up, his expression dignified, and he looked at his heart in disbelief. I saw that his heart was penetrated by a sword, and his origin turned into a mottled star, which quickly overflowed. No, it's impossible. How could my origin be damaged? He was terrified, and then fell completely. All this happened in an instant, and it was just a single fight that eliminated a top repair of the same realm. With such combat power, there is no top repair to underestimate. The remaining 2 top shaves were extremely dignified, and it was obvious that their companions had fallen, giving them a great deal of pressure. The two looked at each other, then acted at the same time, and flew directly towards Su-jin, bursting out their strongest blow. The void oscillates, and the two majestic forces reach. Su-jin took a deep breath again. With the second form of the flowing cloud grass sword, he killed a top repairer at the same level, and the third form that was not yet proficient would probably not be able to perform to the extreme. Although he thought so, he still released the third formula. Go to the water. The third style of going to the water is actually a style that combines the two styles of sword intent and uses them. Although it seems simple, it is introverted, and if you are not thoroughly familiar with the first two styles of sword intent, you can't play at all. As soon as the sword intent came to the water, the entire void, centered on Su-jin, seemed to become a flood of spring water. The two top repairers who had gone all out when they stepped into this place, they were like drowning, and they were suddenly tied to them, and they couldn't even release their strength. It was in this short instant that Su-jin was so small and thin that he was holding a real sword, like a heaven in charge of judgment, and harvested it. The void is silent. At this moment, all the top repairers who saw this scene, even the fairy cultivating, are all bright. Even the old Dian, immortal with muddy eyes, looked at Su-jin at the right time. Nothing else, because this sword is simple and clear, but it is amazing to the extreme, so that all viewers have the heart to learn. The origins were shattered one after another, and the two top repairers who were bound by the sword of going to the water had all no life at this time, like a stone statue sinking into the abyss of void. Su-jin retracted the long sword soaked in blood, and he gasped for breath. Obviously, after completely releasing these three sword intents, he no longer has the power to fight. But even so, his expression is still peaceful, as if he doesn't care about everything. 3 swords killed 3 Ding Xiu in the same realm. He was already very satisfied, and at the same time recalled the figure of the draped clothes in his divine consciousness. I'm afraid that from then on, he will no longer be able to comprehend the exquisiteness of the flowing cloud and grass sword style in the second half of the spectrum. Even the gang wind fell silent in the void, silent. Immediately afterwards, the voice of the old Dian, immortal, sounded. "The junior, tell me the kendo you are practicing, and I will let you make a living and let you practice under my seat. How about—" As soon as these words came out, all the fairy cultivators were in an uproar, and if a third-ranked great elder fairy favored him, his path of cultivation in the future would be extremely bright. This is just a guy who is a top repairer. If he can, breaking through the immortal is just around the corner, and for a while many immortals are hot. Su-jin laughed. He seemed extremely happy, and his clear voice resounded in the void. However, in the next moment, he returned to normal with a bit of disdain in his clear eyes. "Only you are worthy. All the immortals are sluggish, can't believe that a small top repairer will give up such a generous condition, and even speak insults to the immortal." Just when all Yenxian thought that the old Dianxian would be furious, he didn't expect him to have any expressions, as if the insult was not that. "Since you don't want to tell the kendo that you are practicing, the old man is not reluctant. You tell me the name of the creator of the kendo. How about the old man also letting you make a living?" The old maid, Yenxian, spoke slowly with a soft tone. Su-jin smiled coldly, glanced at him obliquely, and directly retracted the real sword in his sheath. "My master's name, taboo. Pass to your ears. It is dirty, my master's name, taboo. Even if the disciple is stupid, he will never do such a thing. He is ready to die calmly, not waiting for the old Dian immortal to get angry. A voice like coming from above the 9 heavens rang out. "Since you want to know my name so much, why don't I tell you and listen to it myself?" All the immortals are horrified. They all look behind them like an enemy. I saw the silent, shattered void. A figure dressed as a black ranger, walking slowly. There was an incomparable divine pattern flowing all over his body, exuding an indescribable momentum that made Yensian unable to look directly at him. And behind him, two figures followed closely. One of the bald giants, who was as strong as a sacred peak, was gearing up as if only waiting for a command, then let go. The other figure is holding a silver spear, full of arrogance, full of invincible aura. All Yensian watched this scene with bated breath. Yes, it's Gentian official. In the six-day realm, the few immortals left behind shouted at the same time, their eyes all flushed. Sword Heaven official, Jian Heaven official. At this moment, all the top repairs left in the six-day realm screamed spontaneously. Chapter 49:12. That's a reaction that will only appear after the desperate situation has returned to life. Chun Chiu held his palm tightly, already unable to restrain the excitement in his heart. Big Brother Jian, it is Big Brother Jian who is back. Cui Jing vigorously raised his arms and shouted excitedly. Wei Liujia let out a sigh of relief, only to feel that the hideous wounds on his body no longer hurt. Young Master Qian, who had been waiting for an opportunity to escape, saw this scene, and his heart was inexplicably settled. But he was still ready to escape, because he didn't think that a little fairy would be able to save this defeat. The young man holding the true sword in front of the six-day realm, the disdain and coldness in his eyes disappeared at this moment, replaced by respect and expectation. Seeing this scene, the old Dayan immortal, who was still a little surprised, suddenly sneered. Such a small fairy goddess is just something that can be crushed to death at hand. Now that rank 9 Dayan immortal sheltering the six-day realm was killed by him, he believed that there was no other immortal on the entire battlefield that could resist. Thinking of this, he lazily stretched out a finger and gave orders, "Crush them!" Only this time, a considerable part of Yensian did not leave, all looking at each other, because they noticed that their great heavenly official was actually standing behind the mysterious figure at this moment. "Why don't you do it yet?" Old Maid Dayan said angrily. His voice seemed to tear the void again. But then, among the more than 800 fairy tales, there are nearly 300 fairy tales at this moment, all looking forward, solemnly nodding. Behind Jian Wushuang, the Shuyang, wearing a flowing cloud silver armor and holding a silver gun, took a step forward and said in a condensed voice, "Anyone who listens to my son will leave the battlefield immediately." The sound moved in the void, and ripples were shocked. After hearing this order, the 300 Yangtzeans rushed towards Shuyang without hesitation. Suddenly, there were only more than 400 left of the mighty army of immortals, nearly half of it. "Shuyang, you wantonly—" The old maid Dayan was furious. In his opinion, Shuyang was still just an ant. Since it is an ant on this battlefield, he must obey him. But right now, at a critical point, Shuyang unexpectedly withdrew his troops temporarily. How could this not make him angry? Shuyang glanced at him calmly, and then said loudly, "The urgent order is here, and I have to leave. I want to accompany you in this battle." Hearing this, the old man Dayan was so angry that he couldn't add to his anger. "I see you dare to go?" After he finished speaking, he directly waved his arms, and suddenly the Yanli Guanghua burst out of his palm like a chain, and went straight to those Yensian bundles. The next moment, the sudden change occurred. Jian Wushuang's figure quietly blocked the retreating Yensian, and then he pointed out. In an instant, 1,000,000 strands of Huagong burst into existence, and violently collided. The two collided, and the shattered void was once again torn into an abyss. The extremely magnificent Yanli light illuminates the entire void, and Yensian, who is a little closer, retreats thousands of feet. Old Maid Dayanxian's cloudy eyes stared to the fullest at this moment. He couldn't believe that a small Yanxian could withstand his angry blow. After Hua Meng dispersed, Jian Wushuang, who had not damaged the corners of his clothes, glanced at him calmly, then turned to look at Xu Yang. Xu Yang took a deep breath and solemnly arched his hand in front of him. "Brother Wu, treasure!" After he finished speaking, he took more than 300 Yanxian straight to the immortal formation and soon disappeared. At this point, there were only more than 400 Yanxian and one rank 3 Dianxian left on the entire void battlefield. On the battlefield, a large area was suddenly vacated, and Yanxian and Ding Xiu, who had survived in the 6-day realm, were secretly relieved. The originally restless Sun Qian calmed down and looked at Jian Wushuang with doubts in his eyes. He didn't understand. With the appearance of that guy, the war seemed to be reversing? No, it's impossible. A mere fairy wants to reverse the situation? It's just nonsense. Gong Ziqian shook his head in denial, and then he seemed to think of something. His eyes widened suddenly, full of shock. Then he hurriedly approached Chunqing, who was closest to him, and asked nervously, "Your Sword Heaven official, is that the Sword Heaven official who killed Chang Duoling with his own power?" Chunqing glanced at him, unconsciously lifted the jade belt around his waist, and said arrogantly, "That is what a small one is often more than one order. Then you are optimistic about how Jian Tianguan can turn the tide." Young Master Qian slowly spit out a murky breath, and he also began to faintly look forward to it. What kind of monster it is to be able to shake Dian Immortal's Sword Heaven official with the power of immortality. The void changed from turbulence back to dead silence, and all Yanxian stared at Jian Wushuang. But Jian Wushuang's gaze crossed them, staring at the old Dian Immortal. The familiar scene seems to have begun again. The battle with Chang Duoling was also in this scene. The only thing that changed was that the old Dian Immortal now seemed to have been immersed in the third turn Dian Immortal for a long time. Its unfathomable extent seems to be much deeper than Chang Duoling. A battle with him is inevitable, and Jian Wushuang has already felt it tricky. Here is another guy who is going to die. No matter what, this seat will completely slaughter the 6-day realm today to realize the future troubles. The old Tayanxian said in a deep voice, and at the same time a scepter was condensed in his palm, and he slapped the void hard. "All the gods will be obliterated for 6 days, and no one will be left." The Yanxian army seemed to be impatient for a long time, and after getting the order, they hurried to the 6-day realm. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's cold voice resounded, "Those who don't want to die, go back on the same path now." After he finished his words, a number of sword intent suddenly appeared in his hand, and he swept forward. Several of the fastest Yanxians were crushed directly into Xian Yuan and turned into powder. But this is not enough to stop the Yanxian army. Nearly 400 Yanxian at this moment, like a dark cloud covering the sky, and the sun descending for 6 days. Looking back at the heavy wounds behind him, Diqing and the others, who was already hard to fight, raised his eyebrows slightly, and then he took a step forward resolutely. He was alone facing the army of immortals, every immortal in the 6 heavens realm. Every Ding Xiu just held his palm at this moment. With one's own strength, can you really resist this blow like a mountain and sea? The next moment, the solitary Jian Wushuang, his whole body suddenly increased with divine marks, and his whole figure was like composed of hundreds of millions of sword intent, brilliant and magnificent to the extreme. The entire void began to vibrate violently. After seeing this scene, Yanxian, who participated in that battle, was all shocked and excited to the point of indescribable. Chapter 49:13. It was a sword that was simply incomprehensible, and a sword that could not be stopped. It is a sword that can destroy the heavens, and that no immortal can contend. The power that the sword exudes even gave all Yanxian who participated in that battle an illusion. Even the emperor, under that sword, I am afraid it is difficult to retreat. That sword was so shocking and horrible that it made Jutaangxianjin often make despair to die. He even became the deepest nightmare in every Yangtzean's heart that finally escaped the battlefield. A sword that has surpassed the cognition of every Yanxian, even Dianxian, will come again. Wushuang Kendo, Zingeheijianini, third style. Lake. This is the most prosperous sword, and its birth far exceeded Jian Wushuang's expectations. There is not even any frame that can completely restrain it, including the entire Wushuang Kendo because of this sword intent, and has reached a certain insurmountable height. A heavenly gate that made the emptiness of hundreds of thousands of miles completely cleared slowly appeared. This can no longer be described by the magnificent fairy trails, even the radiant power exuded by the Dayan immortal under this heavenly gate is like a firefly's and a bright moon competing for glory. This magnificent heavenly gate is made of infinite and endless sword intent, pure and incomparable. In the next moment, the heavenly gate that seemed to have sealed up countless years slowly opened, and a quiet lake that seemed to have sealed the years flowed out of it. Jian Wushuang held the invisible sword, his clothes fluttered, and he stepped into the door of the day. The lake flows in the void, like a clear spring, where the sun, moon, and stars are all born. All the immortals who saw this scene were horrified. Even if they were crazy and desperate, they felt the terrifying breath. Even the old maid Dayan immortal on the outermost periphery suddenly opened his eyes at this moment, and only horror and disbelief remained in his muddy eyes. Even he has no idea what language to describe this sword. The glorious light in the Tianmen is extremely radiant, like when a big sun blooms. A true shadow emerges from it. That was the true shadow cast by the pure sword intent, and his sword intent was so brilliant that it eclipsed everything. He led the sword with his hand and came from the heavenly gate. Even the way of heaven is creeping underfoot. This sword even exceeded the cognition of the old Dianxian. This is supposed to be a sword of Xingyi, but will it be embodied? At this moment, when the light was at its peak, the old Dianxian finally thought of a word to describe it. This sword is like an emperor angry. The huge sword was so huge that it seemed to be piled up with the Milky Way, extinguishing the void and extinguishing the heavens. All tangible and qualitative objects are completely turned into powder at this moment. The void entered the deepest level of collapse, and even the uncontrollable void wind was torn apart. With the giant sword as the center, the void was shattered to form a violent vortex, madly swallowing everything. Even Yanli could not escape. Under this sword, even the rest of the heavens, hundreds of millions of miles away, were affected, and all began to shatter and shatter. The more than 400 Yanxian who walked out of the fairy formation were all destroyed by this sword at this moment, and none of the Yanxian could escape. One sword lost 400 cents. The old Dayan immortal had been so frightened, he even fled with all his strength when the 400 Yanxian was destroyed. But can it escape? The void battlefield has been out of control, and all the heavens outside the six-day realm have been destroyed and become fans. Originally, the six-day realm also avoided falling under this sword, but Dai woke up soberly and used his already damaged real life to forcibly shut out Jian Wushuang's sword. As the nine-turned Dayan, immortal Di Qing, who had come out of the era, when Zhen Wuyang became the emperor, faced Jian Wushuang and faced his sword, there was a throbbing from the bottom of his heart. This sword even threatened him. Di Qingqiang resisted the dizziness in his head, looking at the true shadow that made the heavens crawl under his feet. His eyes became clearer and brighter. This sword lasted a long time. When the incomparable sword intent turned into a lake and returned to the gate of heaven, the true shadow of selflessness standing in the void of heaven and earth slowly opened his eyes. Looking around, everything is turned into dust. Even heaven is no exception. Even the void has turned into the most primitive state of chaos, full of indescribable silence. At this moment, in the entire void battlefield, there are only more than a dozen immortals in front of the six-day realm portal and thousands of top repairers. Without exception, all of them were blind in their eyes, staring at the front blankly, as if they hadn't recovered from the scene just now. And the more than 400 Yensian army had been completely broken into powder, not even a bit of the fairy source or even the bones, as if they had never appeared before. On the opposite side of Jian Wushuang, only a lonely figure remained. At this moment, only panic was left in his muddy eyes, as if it were the panic of the rest of his life. Both are dead, Old Maid Dian murmured, and a ray of blood poured out from the corner of his mouth. He fled desperately, but in the end he was a step late and suffered the most serious damage. He no longer knows how many Huanyan hasn't tasted the taste of severe damage, and now he has tasted it truly. He even believed that if he hadn't escaped in time, the immortal body would have been shattered and the source of immortality would be gone. The power of a sword frightened him. At the same time, the old Dian was puzzled. This is like a sort of an emperor's anger. How could it be released by a small Zioyangxian? Slowly moving forward, Jian Wushuang, who stood holding his hand, finally came to him. The old Dian immortal raised his head, looked at him with a doubtful gaze, and finally said, "I heard earlier that the sixth heavenly immortal used his own power to kill the 9 heavenly immortal monarch Chang dueling. That Yensian, was it you?" "It's me." Jian Wushuang nodded, and didn't intend to hide it, because the matter was already here. He would never let him leave alive. "You killed Chang Dueling's sword at the beginning. Is it the current sword intent?" "Yes." After getting this answer, Old Maid Dian changed his expression, and finally said lonely, "I thought the rumor was nonsense. Now it seems that Chang Dueling was indeed beheaded by you. Able to die under that sword, he died unjustly. The last question, did you create this sword, or did you accept the inheritance of a certain emperor?" He asked. Only solemnity remained in his eyes. Jian Wushuang looked at him and said calmly, "I created it and did not accept any inheritance." The old Tai Yensian trembled, and his muddy pupils became a little bright at this moment. Chapter 49:14. He seemed to have entered a certain state, from panic to calm. "You are only in the realm of Yensian, but you can comprehend this sword, and even cross the border to kill Dianxian. I can no longer imagine where your future will go. If you don't participate in these disputes and live well, then I am afraid that you will disturb the entire Desai domain, or the existence outside the Desai domain. But you also need to know that if you are too stunning, you will definitely be killed. I can also predict your future. It must be too hard. If I can get a chance to survive today, I would like to see where you will go in the future, and whether you will completely overthrow this big division." Old Maid Dian looked at him excitedly. "You are very different." Jian Wushuang looked at him also, with an invisible sword condensed in his palm. In any case, the enemies who saw his sword could not leave alive, especially Dian Immortal. Jian Wushuang never thought that Shen Wuyang and the entire heavenly court were good people, so he was walking cautiously. If Dian Immortal goes to Tongtian court, I am afraid that all unfavorable factors will squeeze him. The Zhen Wuyang, who was able to sweep through nearly 10 emperors and establish the heavenly court, would be nothing more than just a fingertip once the killing intent was moved on him. Therefore, he must eliminate it from the source. The old Dian fairy must not leave alive. "It seems you are not going to let me go?" he asked. Jian Wushuang nodded. "Yes. In that case, I will fight this one last time." Old Maid Dian seemed relieved, ready to let go. Under the previous sword, he has been wounded, and in this battle now, he has the belief that he must fall. Jian Wushuang, also did not dare to underestimate him. Although he had already cut down the 2 Dayan immortals, he still did not dare to underestimate Dayan immortals. There is a fundamental difference between Yanxian and Dayanxian, and Jian Wushuang might be hit hard if he doesn't pay attention. At the moment, the old Dayan immortal is in the 3rd stage, which is much higher than the previous Yun, so he can't relax his guard. With one step out, his black robe surged, and thousands of chain-like powers circulated around him, full of shocking momentum. That is the general trend that belongs to Dayanxian, which makes Yanxian tremble. Jian Wushuang was not afraid, holding an invisible sword in his hand, and confronted him brazenly. At this moment, all the immortals and Dingxiu in the 6-day realm were watching this scene solemnly. The battle between Yanxian and Dayanxian, an extremely unequal and almost impossible scene, happened. This battle will deeply imprint every Dingxiu and every Yanxian deep in his heart. What even they don't know is how far-reaching the impact of this battle is. When I was young or middle-aged, I had never seen a shock like yours, and even that high-ranking existence was somewhat depressed by your appearance. Your sword is too domineering and terrifying. Even I can't face it, but even so, I still need this battle. I want to see with my own eyes how surprised you will bring me. The old Dayan fairy said slowly. His expression was already excited, as if he had returned to the old days. The corner of Jian Wushuang's mouth curled up, and his sword eyebrows sank quietly. And then 36,000 sword intent suddenly emerged from his back, twisting straight forward. "Good come," he shouted in a deep voice, and at the same time all the Yanli chains covering his body rose up, strangling away like real dragons. 36,000 sword intents are all pinnacle swords, and Dayan Immortal is not weak in dealing with it. The terrifying force burst out, and the already chaotic void battlefield was once again messed up. The dark Yanli chain was rapidly shattering. In the end, both disappear at the same time. When the Yanli Huamang in front of him dissipated, Jian Wushuang's figure had quietly reached the face of the old Dayanxian. Facing such a Dayan immortal, Jian Wushuang's eyes were steady, and he held the invisible sword in his hand and slashed fiercely. The old Dayan immortal blocked him in time, and at the same time an extremely dark shadow emerged from behind him, and then madly swallowed Xiang Jian Wushuang. At the same time, the true shadow of selflessness that exudes the blue meaning blessed him. When the incomparably dark real shadow touched the non-self real shadow, a large amount of black smoke was directly emitted, and then it retracted into his body again. The appearance of this scene even surprised the old Dayan immortal. He who has tempered his spirit to the peak can't actually corrode Jian Wushuang. Could it be that he also tempered his spiritual mind? Jian Wushuang naturally wouldn't know his thoughts at the moment, and the original intention of blessing the true shadow of the selfless was not actually initiated by him. The selfless true shadow seems to have a certain sense of self. When the deity is invaded by external forces, it will automatically bless him, which also protects him from spiritual infringement. However, even if there is no automatic protection from the true shadow of the selflessness, the divine consciousness erosion released by the old Dayan immortal just now will definitely not erode him. As early as when Jian Wushuang was in the universe of divine power and ascended to the position of the universe, his divine consciousness had reached the state of perfect harmony and great perfection, and external forces could not intervene to influence his thoughts. Therefore, Jian Wushuang's fighting stance was very wanton. He swung his sword and opened and closed, slashing with one sword and one sword. Sparks overflowed. He seemed to be casting a sword, and the old Dayanxian was like a sword embryo constantly being tempered. If there are bystanders closer, you can see the obvious changes. The sword has no double-face color and is calm, and every sword dropped can easily break one side of the universe. And the Dayan immortal who endures the temper, his complexion gradually turns red, and he can't even resist, and can only bear it silently. This horrified scene was completely reflected in the eyes of all Yenxian and Ding Xiu in the Six-Day Realm, and everyone gasped. The most shocking of these is Gong Ziqian, with his eyes wide open, and he muttered innocently, "Well, what kind of thing is this guy? It's too scary." With the mere power of evolving the immortal, he almost crushed the immortal. Even though the son of Qian was the son of the emperor, he had never seen such a scene. As for Su Jin, who was alone, all eyes were on Jian Wushuang's body at this moment, and he was comprehending the sword style as much as possible. At the same time, he was also dreaming about when he could fight side by side with Jian Wushuang. Today's battle has left an indelible mark on the hearts of all Dingxiu and Yenxian. With one's own power, turning the tide, such a back figure has already conquered many silent hearts. With the blessings of the true shadow of Wu Self, Jian Wushuang now has completely crushed the severely injured old maid Dayan. Under this heavy blow again and again, wisps of divine blood poured out from the corner of his mouth again. Old maid Dayan already knew that his ultimate destination was to die by the sword. Chapter 49:15. Even now, he regrets that he has not chosen a correct path. If it fell under the previous sword intent that shook the sky and the earth, it would still be dead and dignified. But now that this situation has fallen, I am afraid that it will become the laughingstock of all ages. As Dayan immortal at the veteran level in the Daisai domain, he could not accept this result. Junior Yuit! He was furious, struggling directly with the immortal body to be injured, and blasted Jian Wushuang far away. The invisible sword in his hand shattered. Jian Wushuang put his right hand behind him without any trace, and looked at him calmly. The right hand, which was behind him, was already dripping with blood, dripping wet in the clothes. He still underestimated the power of Dayan Immortal. If he hadn't avoided it in time, he would have suffered even more serious injuries. Junior, you should despise the old man. Although the old man has been injured, he may not have the power to fight, said the old man Dayan angrily. Jian Wushuang ignored him, and when he lifted his palm, the chaos and the void shook, and 100,000 sword intent quietly emerged from behind him. Every sword intent carried a terrifying general trend, a total of 100,000 swords, all of which were the strongest blow. Looking at the 100,000 sword intent like a forest of swords, the old Mai Taiyan was also solemn. In the long and almost endless years till now in the Wangu era, he has seen too many immortals, even Dayan immortals, but the only thing he has never seen before is Jian Xiu. The so-called sword repair is actually a very vague title because after boarding the Yenxian, few Yenxian use foreign objects to improve themselves, but this is not absolute. Among them, Yenxian opened up the sword and controlled the real sword, so as to break through the bottleneck. The result of this is two completely different results. The bad result is that it drags down one's own cultivation level, and the path of cultivation falls into chaos, making it difficult to progress in this lifetime. And the good result is that it far surpasses the immortal generation in the same realm and becomes the existence of shocking Tianjiao. But this kind of stunning arrogance has never even seen the old Dayan, immortal, who has experienced the most ancient. The only shocking heavenly arrogant he identified was the supreme being who walked out of the barren land, carried an unknown destiny, calmed the chaos with his own power, and finally became the emperor. But even the supreme being is purely cultivating itself, not foreign objects. Therefore, Jian Wushuang, who had cultivated his kendo to the extreme, brought the shock to the old Dayan immortal, which was even the same as the shock he experienced when he saw the emperor for the first time. This is the second stunning arrogant that he agrees with, and the existence that is about to kill him. Jian Wushuang stood on the opposite side of him, then tapped his finger. In an instant, 100,000 sword intent swept up, facing the old Dayan immortal stabbed, fiercely. The shock wave erupted from the shining void, made Yanxian unable to gain a foothold. Jian Wushuang stood in the same place, calmly looking at the center of the sacrificial explosion. He didn't think this could kill a Dayan immortal. As if to confirm his conjecture, the sword intent that was still venting wildly at this moment stopped completely. Then the void twisted for a while, and an enchantment circle appeared, like a black hole, directly swallowing all the sword intent that was still venting, abruptly changing the situation of the battle. When all the 100,000 sword intents dissipated, the old Mai Taiyan, immortal holding a pitch-black scepter, slowly appeared. The enchantment circle, like a black hole, was released from the scepter, evading the attack of the sword intent. That's the case. Jianni still hurt him more or less. At this moment, the old Dayanxian was no longer passive, but chose to attack first. He was holding a pitch-black scepter, his whole figure resembling a shadow of electricity, and he blasted forward. Jian Wushuang resisted and was immediately knocked down and flew out by that unmatched force. At the same time, hundreds of Yanli chains like real dragons protruded from behind him, pouring down frantically and strangling. Even Jian Wushuang was struggling to resist under this wave of powerful offensives. The old maid, Yanxian, swept away his previous old state, as if he was back in his youth, swinging a heavy punch that could easily tear the heavens, hitting his fairy body with punch after punch. 1,000,000 punches in a flash. But in just a few dozen breaths of time, they fought to a terrible point, and the chaotic void seemed to be squeezed to the extreme by Nayan force. But Jian Wushuang felt that his fairy body seemed to be beginning to break, and there were already fine cracks in his chest. If this fight continues, he is very likely to lose. Jian Wushuang made a decisive decision, and directly took the old Maidayan immortal pose, thereby separating a certain distance. Forcibly resisting the sharp pain in the fairy body, the 7 galaxies between his eyebrows slowly circulated. Xian style, a little mountain and river. In this fairy style, all the rules of mountains and rivers are used by Jian Wushuang. As Jian Wushuang waved his hand, a divine peak suddenly grew out of the void, blocking the old maid Dayan. Another water dragon was turned out, all roaring and rolling down. Seeing this scene, the old Dayan immortal was shocked again. He originally thought Jian Wushuang was just perfecting kendo to the extreme, but he didn't expect to master even the immortal style. You must know that once Yanxian masters the immortal style, it means that if there is no mistake, then he will surely ascend the place of Dayanxian. He couldn't imagine how far a Jian Xiu who achieved the position of great Yan immortal would go. Recovering from the shock, the old Dayanxian still launched an offensive. With a punch, Shenfeng shattered and Tianhe stopped flowing. He stepped on the void and rushed straight ahead. Behind him, chains of Yanli came across the sky, trying to completely kill Jian Wushuang. Facing Dayanxian's full blow, Jian Wushuang slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid breath, and then released Wushuang Kendo again. Zingehu Heijianini, second style. River. The current rushes wildly, as if the Tianhe River hanging down from the sky is pouring down with an unimaginable trend, tore through the chaos and flocked directly to the old Dayan. This sword river is completely composed of countless sword intents, and it is the most powerful sword intent that establishes Zingehuhai sword intent. Standing on the tide of Jianhe, Jian Wushuang was no longer indifferent, his Jian eyebrows solemn. His sword would inevitably cause severe damage to the old Dayan immortal before it was possible to kill him in the next time. This war has been going on for a long time and cannot wait any longer. But killing the old Dayan immortal is the final end. At this moment, All the Dingxiu and Yanxian in the six-day realm were extremely nervous. Can this sword kill Dian Immortal? The chaotic void was instantly shaken by the huge force, and under that impact, it split and shattered again. The endless radiant power, radiant light, completely ignited the entire void battlefield, and the afterglow of radiant power flowed in the air like a tassel. Chapter 49:16. The mighty river-shaped sword was intent in the void, almost swallowing the entire void. The strength training released by the old Dian Immortal could no longer support it, and was swallowed by the sword intent from all directions. Void and silent, only the Kendo River rushes. Win-win. Yu Dingxiu couldn't help but said excitedly, and young Master Qian, who had almost escaped from the dead, was the most excited at this moment. The hundreds of Yanxian under his seat had all fallen, but he was still alive intact, and even his Yanli was not lost much. This was something he had not dared to think about before, and he had even considered serious injuries and being captured. But now, everything has settled. The sun humbly shouted in excitement. Fucking Jian Tianguan, unparalleled in the world. Just as the same stone stirred up 1,000 layers of waves, all Dingxiu and Yanxian in the six-day realm all shouted spontaneously. Jian Tianguan, the world is unparalleled. Jian Tianguan, the world is unparalleled. The voice pierced the void. They won this battle. This is an unimaginable battle, with nearly 1,000 fairy gods and 2 big gods joining. However, the Six Heavens realm only had more than 100 immortals. Facing the impact of nearly 1,000 immortals, they actually kept the Six Heavens realm. This is an unimaginable and incredible battle, but every surviving immortal Yan and Dingxiu knew that without those two, there would be no such ending. All the voices they shout spontaneously are their truest thoughts. However, at this moment, only Di Qing looked at Jian Wushuang with solemn eyes, and at the void that the river vented that day. He had a hunch that Dian Immortal would never die so easily. At this moment, Jian Wushuang did not relax. His eyes were still fixed on the center of Jianhe. It's good that this sword can kill it, but if it can't kill it, it will fight again. When Jianhe completely dissipated, an almost unsteady figure appeared. His immortal body was almost on the verge of breaking, and the dark power escaped from the body and then dissipated into the void. It can be seen that his fairy source is about to collapse. Jian Wushuang secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The fairy source collapsed. Even for Dian Immortal, it was an irreversible sign of death. The old Dian Immortal is about to die. Although he was about to stand unsteadily, he still straightened the immortal body and looked at Jian Wushuang fixedly. You are too far from my imagination. The old man is convinced of defeat. After saying this, he knelt and sat in the void, seeming to be waiting for the death. But old man, I still want to live. Jian Wushuang stepped forward slowly, and he didn't have much disgust at this old Dian Immortal, and he was more calm. And the reason why he stepped forward was to make sure that he would not release his mind to escape. Just when Jian Wushuang was less than 1 foot away from the old Dian Immortal, the old Dian Immortal, who had closed his eyes and waited for his fall, suddenly opened his eyes. Then, at an unimaginable speed, he shot Jian Wushuang like a thunderstorm. This is really too fast, and even Jian Wushuang can't react. A black and extremely sharp scepter went into his heart fiercely. Old Maid Dian changed his previous decay, and his eyes were full of madness and pride. Junior, although you are very strong, you are still a bit too tender. Are you so sure that I don't even have a chance to fight back? Looking down at the jet black scepter on his chest, Jian Wushuang's calm eyes fluctuated somewhat. Then he said quietly, "Idiot, you didn't get in." The old Dian Immortal was taken aback for a moment, and immediately looked into his hand subconsciously. Crack! Immediately afterwards, Bursts of crystal cracking resounded. That black scepter was covered with cracks in an instant, and it shattered directly from the tip of the stick. No, it's impossible. How could my cane be like this? The old Dian Xian was shocked and couldn't imagine what happened. Do you think I don't have any defense? Jian Wushuang said quietly, and at the same time waved his hand to tear off the broken black robe, revealing a dark blue glow. Every piece of azure blue beetle is like alive, all in a regular rhythm, magnificent to the extreme. This is Chong Dueling's Zhou Qian Yishuan. The old Mai Dian Xian was panicked, and he finally knew why his rod could not cause serious damage to Jian Wushuang. There are rumors in the entire Great Division that the Nine Heavens' immortal monarch often orders a treasure that can resist all external forces and can even block the emperor's full blow. Rumor has it that the Nine Heavens Yishuan is only azure blue, composed of 99,000 beetle leaves, extremely magnificent. Right now, the blue armor on Jian Wushuang's body is not Chong Dueling's Jiu Tian Xian. The old Dian, immortal, only felt that the blood in his body was completely cold. He never expected that Jian Wushuang would wear a 9-day clothing xian, thus resisting his blow. Jian Wushuang's eyes were joking, allowing the black scepter on his chest to be completely broken, and then he stretched out his hand to pinch the old Mai Dianxian's neck. Chong Duoling was killed by you. Is his Zhou Tian Yixian also seized by you? There is no fighting spirit in his eyes. Only despair is left. I didn't want to seize his Zhou Tian Yixian. This armor was given to me at the last moment. Jian Wushuang said. Hearing this, he seemed to feel something. He suddenly grinned. Yes, also who is not in love when you are about to die. You and I don't have blood feuds. This battle doesn't have to happen, but since everything is irreversible, the old man will ask for something at the end. He looked at Jian Wushuang. The old man wants to decide on his own. No. Jian Wushuang refused without any hesitation, leaving no room for it. Originally, he still had some compassion for him, but the last attack killed. If Jian Wushuang hadn't put on Zhou Tian Yixian in advance, I am afraid he would be hit hard, and even the fairy body would be broken. The old Dian Xian also knew the reason, and had no face to ask for others, so he could only close his eyes and die. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore. Thousands of sword intent appeared directly in his right palm, and then blasted on his fairy body. The sword intent surged, tearing the old Dian to pieces without any hindrance. The source of the fairy was destroyed. The fairy body turned into powder, scattered in the void. A tier 3 Dian immortal fell into Jian Wu's hands. So far, the battle that almost included 5 emperors ended at the cost of losing more than 1,000 Yanxian. This battle was the most tragic one after Zhen Wuyang opened up the Desai domain. Countless heavens and countless creatures disappeared silently under this battle, and even Yanxian died without any value. Chapter 49:17. Not only did Yanxian die worthlessly, but even Dianxian died. 9 heavens, immortal monarch Chong Duoling, dead immortal Yuyun, and the 3 Dian immortals of old Mai Dian all died in this battle, and they were all beheaded by Jian Wushuang. This can no longer be described by the battle between ordinary emperors and sons. If the extent of its destruction is let go, I am afraid that only the heavenly court, where Zhen Wuyang sits, can control the situation. When this shocking battle finally ended, the originally silent void battlefield broke out again with a shocking cry. Jian Tianguan, the world is unparalleled. Jian Tianguan, the world is unparalleled. Jian Wushuang, whose back was facing the 6 heavens realm, suddenly paled a bit at this moment, and then a ray of divine blood poured out from the corner of his mouth, dripping onto Zhou Tian Yixian, and was quickly absorbed. In the end, he underestimated the insidious and terrifying old age Dian. If he hadn't put on the 9 heavens cloth profound in advance, Only the final attack would be enough to make his fairy body instantly shattered. The full blow of the third, rank Dian, immortal, was still terrifying after all. Fortunately, he was not severely injured after wearing the Jiu Tian Yi Xian. At the same time, what made Jian Wushuang a little frightened was that Chang Duoling's Jiu Tian Yi Xuan had been pierced by a sword from his heart, breaking a gap, and if the old Dian immortal attacked and killed it, it would deviate. At 1 inch, Jian Wushuang couldn't escape the end of silence. The battlefield changes rapidly, and the ending may be reversed every moment. But there is only one ending right now. Jian Wushuang stands alone in the void, as if he is crushing the eternity. Jian Wushuang, the world is unparalleled. All Dingxiu and Yanxian rushed to Jian Wushuang spontaneously at this moment. Brother Sword, Brother Jian, Big Brother Sword. At this moment, Chuanqiu, Cui Jing, Chen Qing, Wei Liujia, and Zhao Ting all greeted them with sincere smiles on their faces. Even Diqing, who has always been calm and extremely arrogant, nodded to Jian Wushuang at this moment. Wushuang, what he did is very good. Looking at the faces after the battle, Jian Wushuang also smiled and smiled from the bottom of his heart, and then he solemnly bowed his hands. Everyone, we won. All Dingxiu cheered, and the most humble Su Jin looked at Jian Wushuang from a distance, her eyes flushed slightly. He didn't know when he would be able to catch up with Jian Wushuang. He didn't dare to hope. He could only watch from a distance. Maybe one day in the future, he will be qualified to stand by his side. If it weren't for the emptiness to be too chaotic and broken, Chen Qing and Fengshan could not wait to raise Jian Wushuang to cheer. Immediately afterwards, the thin purple robe that hugged Xiao Dijuan came from the chaotic void, and both of them were soaked in divine blood, almost falling. Jian Wushuang saw this scene, and when he was about to speak, the last immortal formation that had been silent suddenly turned out of immortal patterns. 100,000 fairy patterns flowed, and the chaotic void was illuminated at this moment. At this moment, all Yanxian and Dingxiu looked solemn again. They all know that the circulation of the fairy formation indicates that there will be a large army arriving on the battlefield soon. The excitement on their faces has not even subsided, but is replaced by bitterness. The thin purple robe hugged Xiao Dijuan and came to Jian Wufang. His face was extremely old. Guardian Jiantian, retreat. The only remaining forces can no longer suffer losses. Jian Wushuang was silent. Dingxiu and Yanxian behind him were silent, waiting for him to make the final decision. At this moment, a cold and disdainful voice resounded from the fairy array. Want to retreat? Dreaming. With this voice resounding through the void, huge and mighty immortals walked out of the immortal formation. Seeing this scene, even Jian Wushuang's heart sank. Hundreds of Yanxians came to the battlefield of the void. A whole 100 Yanxian with extremely abundant developmental power joined the battlefield, which was a crushing blow to the six-day realm and others who had almost no power to fight. Di Qing has been severely injured, and Chuanqiu, Chun Qing, and other Yanxians have been severely injured more or less, and it is no longer difficult to fight. As for the top repair, for Yanxian, it is almost dispensable. In the entire six-day realm, there is still the power of a battle now. Only Jian Wushuang is left. The 100 evangelists who came out of the immortal formation quickly dispersed as soon as they appeared on the void battlefield, and surrounded them all, obviously not planning to let one go. When the immortal formation finally died out, a Yingwu Yanxian dressed in scarlet gold armor walked out of it. He surrounded the heavens, and even the heavens surrendered to him. The extremely heroic face is full of supreme majesty, terrifying to the extreme. Seeing his appearance, Jian Wushuang's eyes condensed. This Yingwu Yanxian wearing a red gold armor is no one else but the third emperor under the seat of Zhenliang, Gongziyu. He is the representative of arrogance and arrogance. As early as the battle for the peach in the heavenly court, he wanted to break through the ban on the fairy peach with his own power and enjoy the peach alone, and finally fell out of the game. In the former heavenly court of Lu Crow Emperor, he was severely defeated by Jian Wushuang and was almost beaten to death. Now, he has appeared on the battlefield of the void again, which has shown that he and the sun are on the same line. Although young Master Yu is arrogant, he has mastered the immortal style, which is not to be underestimated. Especially at the moment, the pressure he exudes is extremely strong. At this moment, even if you want to escape, it is a luxury. The young Master Yu, who stepped on the path of heaven and wore a red gold armor, could not help but smile coldly when Yinghua's gaze slowly swept over the remaining Yanxian and Dingxiu before the six-day realm. Especially when he saw an enraged little emperor. He could hardly help laughing, but soon he recovered his dignity again, squinted to Xiaotigen, then said in a deep voice, "Gongzi Yen, I have already found out the real culprit who made the fifth brother fall. And you are the real culprit who killed the fifth brother. Now I will capture you and hand it over to the emperor." Gong Ziyu directly pushed such a crime to Xiao Dijuan, which was something Jian Wushuang hadn't expected. He was the person who witnessed the battle of killing the emperor. Under the hibiscus tree, Zheng Ying swung his sword and cut off the head of the fifth emperor's son, Sun Emo, and shattered his fairy source by the way, causing Sun Emo to completely die. But Jian Wushuang guessed that the extremely mysterious Zheng Ying was probably a mysterious immortal under the seat of the young Master Jiao, and it was definitely not sent by the little emperor. Therefore, when Gong Ziyu pushed down the charge, Jian Wushuang directly concluded that this was his random guess. Little Emperor, who was already extremely weak, gave young Master Yu a sideways glance, then slowly turned around, looked at Jian Wushuang, and whispered, "Brother Jian, you go. I will see if they dare to destroy me." Chapter 49:18. Now that there are only more than 10 eternal evangelists left, and no more than 1,000 top repairers facing the eternal army who rejoined the void battlefield, there is no power at all. Even with Jian Wushuang, it is difficult to reverse the situation. But the current situation is not that they don't want to escape, but that they have no way to escape and can only fight against the trapped beast. Jian Wushuang quickly sorted out several ideas to escape in his mind, but they were all rejected by him in the end. Di Qing, they were all more or less hit hard. If they left resolutely, they would be even more passive. After thinking for a while, Jian Wushuang's sound transmission reached Di Qing. "And the others, you will go first later, and I will leave it for you, don't worry." When they heard this, their faces were a little sad, but they all knew that this was the best plan, and if they continued to stay in the void battlefield, there would be no meaning. Wearing a red gold armor and stepping on the heavenly Tao, Gong Ziyu suddenly pulled out the real sword on his waist and pointed it directly at the sky. "Catch Gong Ziyin!" In an instant, the evangelists distributed throughout the void battlefield all released their majestic evangelism training at this moment. A total of 100 Yanxian shots and 100 Yanli practitioners surrounded them from all directions and almost immediately trapped them completely. Each force training is a full blow of an immortal, and it is almost impossible to break. At this moment, even the void is illuminated. Gong Ziyu's eyes were full of pride and hatred. Obviously, he still remembered the last time he fought for the peach in the heavenly court, and now he can finally be ashamed. Facing this overwhelming blow, Jian Wushuang quietly closed his eyes. Numerous tassel-like divine patterns flowed quietly from his body, and then the true shadow of the selfless blessed his body, making his entire body exude a hazy brilliance. The next moment, he opened his eyes suddenly. Thunder and sword intent were entangled, and the true shadow of a giant sword condensed from pure sword intent emerged from behind him, standing upright in the void, full of majesty that cannot be seen directly. The true shadow of the giant sword is as high as hundreds of millions of feet. Jian Wushuang shouted in a low voice, his arms suddenly raised, as if he was holding a sword hilt, sinking and pressing down. In an instant, the heavens died, and the chaotic void shattered and collapsed again. The true shadow of the huge sword, which is full of billions of feet, tore through all obstacles and fell down. Under this sword, the encircling circle of the power of 100 immortals was broken directly, as if a disaster had come. All Yanxian watched the scene in shock, and even forgot to avoid it. Under this sword, nearly 20 Yanxian had no time to escape and died on the spot, and the encircling circle was directly torn open. From this, the void was plowed into a crack of hundreds of millions of miles, and the mad wind of void raged. Leave soon. Jian Wushuang stood with his hands behind him, looking at them calmly. All Dingxiu gritted their teeth, and then rushed towards the boundless void with all their strength. Di Qing and Jian Wushuang glanced at each other, nodded silently, and then directly encased the Chuanxiu and others, and went straight to the void. So far, on the entire void battlefield, Dingxiu and Yanxian have been reduced by more than half. The Sun Yu guy was dumbfounded, and he hadn't recovered from the scene just now. The scene just now was too shocking. Not only Gong Ziyu, but even the Yanxian army was in shock. You leave too, we'll be here soon. Jian Wushuang said as he looked at the little emperor beside him. His voice is beyond doubt, but he just smiled weakly. If you are here, I can't leave alone. His Sun Yu wants my life, which has nothing to do with you. I stay here, and the worst is to leave you a way to survive. Jian Wushuang was silent. He understood the meaning of his words, but before he could continue to speak, Xiao Dijuan straightened his clothes and took a step forward. His handsome and coquettish face is full of coldness at the moment. Gong Ziyu, my son, Yan is here. You can handle it, but let them go. After recovering from the shock, Gong Ziyu's eyes flashed with a deep, jealous color, and he naturally recognized Jian Wushuang, the mysterious person who had frustrated Gong Zizhen in the heavens. Taking a deep breath, Gong Ziyu directly stretched out his hand and waved, "Catch Gong Ziyan!" In an instant, dozens of Yanxians came from all directions. In the next moment, the sudden change, the fastest Xian with a digital punch suddenly stopped in place, and then the Xian's body broke into countless pieces. Zheng dash, the fine sound of gold and iron strikes resounded in the void. Holding the invisible sword, Jian Wushuang, with the Xuanha pattern flowing all over his body, walked forward slowly. He killed several Yanxian with a single sword, which was extremely terrifying. Gong Ziyu stepped back subconsciously, facing Jian Wushuang. He felt inexplicably lingering. Another Yanxian brazenly rushed towards Jian Wushuang, and Wubi's Yanli power crashed down. A sword cut horizontally. The sword intent was vertical and horizontal, instantly swallowing Na Yanxian and smashed into pieces in a neat manner. Go! Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice when he came to Xiadaijin's face. He didn't hesitate anymore. After a light nod, he was ready to leave. Seeing this scene, Gong Ziyu's eyes suddenly condensed. Want to leave? Leave it to me. All the immortals listened to orders, trap them here regardless of the cost, and must not let them go. He shouted loudly. At this moment, there were more than 70 Yanxians left on the void battlefield. They looked at each other, and then they flew towards Jian Wushuang. The power of growth released by more than 70 Yanxians is still extremely shocking. Void trembles. Jian Wushuang's heart is slightly shocked. Facing so many encirclement of immortals, he still has tremendous pressure. After slaying the dead fairy Yuyun, he kept fighting against the old might die an immortal again, which had already overdrawn the power of his immortal body to the extreme. In this situation, he couldn't release the sword intent of the word lake at all. Jian Wushuang is already at the end of the battle, facing so many immortals. All he can do is to get Xiaodigin and Thin Zipeo out of danger. Okanshu, calm thinking of this, he suddenly threw the invisible sword in his hand. The 10 or so Yangtzeans who had been surrounded in front saw this scene and hurriedly avoided a path. The invisible sword tore a crack directly in the void. Then Jian Wushuang waved his arm and pushed Xiao Dijuan and the thin purple robe out. 1,000,000 miles. You can't let the young man run away. Young Master Yu shouted anxiously, but soon he discovered that Jian Wushuang had actually rushed towards him. Unspeakable horror rushed to his heart. He immediately broke his strength and hurriedly ordered all Yanxian to come back for protection. The group of Yangtzeans who were still chasing the little emperor had to give up and returned back, came to Gongziyu and manipulated Yanli to surround Jian Wushuang. Ask for monthly pass. Chapter 49:19. Seeing that his safety was guaranteed, Gongziyu took a sigh of relief and looked at him with a grin. It's so funny. Instead of running away, you are throwing yourself into the net. Tell me what benefit the son, Yen, gave you so that you can save him so desperately. Jian Wushuang heard the words, did not speak, obviously too lazy to reply to him. It seemed that he felt being underestimated, and young Master Yu felt annoyed in his heart, but soon calmed down. No matter what benefits the Sun Yin gives you, I will give you more generous benefits, as long as you stay with me. How about? His son Yin is by no means a good person. Even his own brother can kill. Do you think you will have a good end if you follow him? Instead of following him, it is better to follow me. I assure you that I will give you what you want. Gongziyu said slowly, a triumphant color flashed in his eyes. And the next moment, what responded to him was an extremely sharp sword intent. He was shocked and hurriedly changed his body shape, but he was still a step late. The sharp sword intent directly left a deep wound on his cheek. Divine blood dripped continuously, soaking his golden armor. Damn thing, you dare to hurt me? Young Master Yu was furious to the extreme. Letting blood drip off his face, he suddenly raised his sword. All Yanxian will kill him at all costs. The overwhelming Yanxian crushed and arrived, and the mighty Yin power surged down. Jian Wushuang still stood still on the spot, leading the sword with his hand, fighting the exhaustion of his power, once again released Wushuang Kendo. Wushuang Kendo Zingehu Heijianyani, the second style. River, the long river of swordsmanship, which started from nowhere, shattered the void, and gushed out from every crack, and then gathered in a line, madly rushing towards every Yanxian. All Yangtzeans were shocked when they saw this scene, and they naturally felt the majestic momentum contained in this sword river. The foresight Yanxian retreated and walked close to 10,000 feet, but there were also Yanxian who planned to resist, but they were directly strangled into pieces by Jianhe without even making a sound. Under this sword, nearly 20 Yanxian died. Only after these few encounters, there were only less than 50 immortals brought by Gongziyu. A wisp of cold sweat gushed from his temples, and he finally understood why the Yanxian who had been dispatched had disappeared cleanly. That Jian Wushuang is very strong. Although he was the peak of immortal relations, he easily obliterated the immortal relations without any effort. Could it be that he really killed Chang Duoling? Gongziyu's pupils shrank suddenly, and he already regretted coming to this mess. Looking at the Kendo River that was still erupting, Yanxian continued to die. Gongziyu's expression was uncertain, and in the end his heroic face showed a bit fierce. Immediately afterwards, he stretched out his hand and wiped it on his waist, and a bronze bell the size of a wine cup appeared in his hand. With the appearance of this bronze bell, The energy of the surrounding millions of voids fell silent, showing a strange dark blue color. And around the bronze bell, dark blue crystals are condensing, as if there is life in rhythm. Seeing the bell exposed in the void, Gong Ziyu's eyes flashed with fleshy pain. Tsang Yuzhong, this last time, I hope you can kill all the enemies in front of me for me. He murmured, then gritted his teeth and threw the bronze bell in his hand into the void. The next moment, that bronze bell rose against the storm and almost instantly formed a terrifying tripod that could encompass thousands of heavens. This scene was too shocking. With the appearance of this bell ding, it seemed that even the boundless void was covered by it. This Wangu great bell, named Tsang Yuzhong, appeared, causing all the eternal immortals to tremble, and the originally broken heavenly Tao could not withstand the pressure, and was fragmented. Jian Wushuang, who was in the center, felt that a life-and-death crisis that had never been imagined was approaching, making him almost ready to escape without even thinking about it. But this Wangu Dazhong is too vast. The universe it encompasses is almost unimaginable, so Jian Wushuang has no possibility to escape. He was ready to escape, desperately, only to feel that the strength of his body had become a dead concrete pool, directly imprisoning him in it, unable to move at all. A wisp of cold sweat flowed from Jian Wushuang's temples, and he could feel the breath that contained him. It was the way of heaven. It is a very old way of heaven. It is a way of heaven that does not belong to this era, and it is an extremely old and terrifying rule. Facing such a Tsangyu bell, with the ancient heavenly path, Jian Wushuang had nothing to do. He was completely restricted, and he couldn't even do it in the blink of an eye. This is a big ban. I am afraid that even the truth of the heyday cannot get out of the pressure of this Kangwu Zhong. And this Tsangyu clock seemed to be conscious. After binding Jian Wushuang, it quickly shrunk, and from the original supreme distance, a big clock of thousands of miles was formed in a flash. Within this big clock, Jian Wushuang was bound by the dark blue heavenly power, unable to move at all. At this moment, all Yangtzeans are surrounded by the clock, looking at the clock solemnly. Afterwards, young master, you moved slowly, his eyes filled with resentment. His Tsangyu bell is the supreme immortal tool belonging to the Wangu era. It was once the treasure in the hands of his emperor Zhen Wuyang. It killed countless Dayan immortals, and the heavenly laws contained in it were irresistible. Even the emperor will suffer. It's just that this Tsangyu clock is now dying, and its service life is only this last time. This Tsang Yuzhong, as the most powerful life-saving trump card of Gong Ziyu, was now used on Jian Wushuang. The thing wasted my last chance of Tsang Yuzhong. I swear I will turn you into blood, and you will be lost. Gong Ziyu roared in anger. As his voice fell, Tsangyu bell rang, and countless magnificent flowers bloomed from it, illuminating the boundless void. In the Tsangyu bell, Jian Wushuang instantly spouted blood from Qiqiao. He only felt that his whole body was about to be shattered. The unimaginable ancient rules of heaven contain unknown unknowns that can't be said, making Jian Wushuang helpless. Could it be that I fell like this? Divine blood gushed from the corner of his mouth, and he couldn't break free at all. The dark blue heavenly rules were quickly devouring everything about him. The immortal body, transformed from an ultra-perfect chaotic creature, is rapidly shattering at this moment. However, Jian Wushuang had no way to break free. This was the first time he was truly helpless. That kind of irresistible force is too domineering. Gongzi's hideous face was reflected in his eyes, and all Yangtzeans laughed at this moment. Chapter 49:20, a guy who can even kill, die an immortal, even make all the immortals lower their eyebrows. Being besieged and suffering at this moment, and going to fall irreversibly, there is nothing more pleasant than this kind of thing. Gong Ziyu didn't even bother to wait and see. The terrible Sangyu Bell couldn't even escape the nineth rank to Yenxian, let alone a little Yenxian. The immortal body is collapsing. The immortal body disintegrates like stars, never returning. At this moment, under the siege of the dark blue sky, Jian Wushuang's consciousness was blurred. The fairy body is inevitably declining. Even if he is still immortal, I am afraid it will be silent for endless years. Jian Wushuang wanted to contend against the Tao of that day, but found that everything was useless. It was a suppression that completely surpassed the realm, which was unimaginable. Even if he tried his best, he didn't have the slightest chance to destroy the Sangyu Bell. Did I just fall like this? But I'm unwilling. Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes red. The divine blood flowing on his body is quickly repairing the dilapidated immortal body, seeming to be contending against the heavens. Gong Ziyu's gaze condensed. He saw that his figure turned out to be against the heavens. How is this possible? He was shocked, knowing that even the 9th rank Dayan immortal could be convinced by this Sangyu Bell. But soon, he relaxed again with some palpitations, because Jian Wushuang only resisted for a moment and then irresistibly decayed. When young Master Ziyu was feeling a little palpitating, it was unimaginable that a Yenxian could compete with Sangyu Bell. Just when Gong Ziyu was about to get to know Jian Wushuang in advance, 2 shaky figures walked from a distant void. The leader was Xiao Dijuan. His luxurious clothes had been damaged, and his exposed skin was full of wounds. But at this moment, his eyes are full of the majesty of the emperor. He glanced at Gong Ziyu, and then walked towards the rapidly shrinking Sangyu Bell. Upon seeing this, Gong Ziyu was overjoyed. He never thought that Xiao Dijuan would actually throw himself into the trap, saving him the trouble of searching. His Royal Highness, do you want us? Yenxian asked. Gong Ziyu waved his hand. With an arrogant expression, I want to see what he is doing back with this waste, and I will take him down later. All Yenxian promised. All looked at this scene with a smile. The long and slender palm covered with blood was attached to the outer wall of Sangyu Zhong. Looking at Jian Wushuang, who was suffering in the clock, Xiao Dijuan knocked on the outer wall with his fingers. Wushuang. Bloody, Jian Wushuang, who was about to fall, opened his eyes with difficulty, looked at the figure outside Sangyu Zhong. He sighed secretly. Listen to me, Xiao Dijuan affixed to the outside of Sangyu Bell, and said clearly, take out the golden jade ring I gave you earlier and open it. Jian Wushuang could hear his voice, but at this time it would be difficult to move a finger, let alone take out the golden jade ring in his arms. The little emperor outside Sangyu Zhong seemed to have known his difficulties and began to feel at a loss. And young Master Yu, who was far away, heard something was wrong, and he hurriedly issued orders. Hurry up, catch young Master Yen. Don't let him speak. All Yenxian hurriedly set off to catch Xiaodigen. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang, who was about to die, struggled to break the fairy body and stretched his palm into his arms with all his strength. Even the ancient, unknown heaven can't help but shake. The golden jade ring was taken out, and a unique color appeared in the palm of Jian Wushuang's white bones. Yeah, he roared. His fingers pushed away the jade ring in the center of the golden jade ring. In an instant, an even more remote and unknown aura of heaven burst out of it, turning into billions of tassels. The appearance of that kind of aura made Jian Wushuang loose, and the dark cyan, heavenly Tao bound around him was directly broken. Immediately afterwards, a supreme true figure wearing a white shirt and looking like a star walked out of the golden jade ring. All Wanggu Tian Dao in Sangyu Bell was crawling on the ground at this moment and shuddered. He seemed to be an ordinary person without any power, but there was a certain kind of authority in his eyes. And all the immortals who saw this true shadow were frightened, almost unable to stand still, and hurriedly knelt down in the void. The immortal bodies were shaking, including Jian Wushuang. They were all shocked. What he never expected was that in the golden jade ring that Xiaodaijin gave him, there was a true shadow of Zhenliang Emperor. Moreover, this true shadow actually belonged to the true shadow of Emperor Zhen Wuyang in his peak period, full of the meaning of contemplation. The already stupid young master, you never expected that a small Zhao Yangxian would actually hold a true shadow of his emperor in his hands. This is simply incredible and unimaginable. There is no real shadow of the emperor in his hands. With the appearance of the true shadow of the Zhen Wuyang Emperor's peak and prosperous period, Sangyu Bell began to mourn, and it could not withstand the pressure of the emperor. The middle-aged Zhen Wuyang Zhening, at this moment, seemed to have a faint doubt in the eyes of Wanyu. He looked at the barrier of Sangyu Zhong and then casually brushed. This contains the Sangyu Bell of the Supreme Way, and it is directly broken. The residue was scattered in the void and soon disappeared. Then Zhen Wuyang Zhening looked at Jian Wushuang, who was dying, and a bit of satisfaction and uncertainty flashed across his eyebrows. Finally, he said, "Are you Yen?" Jian Wushuang, who had no strength to speak, couldn't even shake his head, so he could only look at him firmly, and that Zhen Wuyang Zhening laughed. "Yes, my son Yena really has the posture of the emperor, even though he is so embarrassed, but it does not matter. There is a father. No one wants to hurt you." Jian Wushuang is completely speechless. Is just a fate. The true shadow of Zhen Wuyang actually regards him as a son. Don't they know each other? Just as Jian Wushuang's spiritual thoughts were empty, Zhen Wuyang, who was full of anger, already looked at the Yangxians who were all kneeling in the void. "A group of ants. Dare to hurt me, Yenner." The Sangyu knelt directly into the void with a plop and said in shock, "The emperor, it's me, Imuer, your third son." "Huh, the third son?" Zhen Wuyang's true shadow was immediately puzzled. "Isn't I the only one, Yenner? Why is there another third son?" Gong Ziyu knew this was a terrible thing, and if he couldn't explain it clearly, he might not have a chance to leave here. So he acted decisively, cut his wrist directly, and spilled the blood in the meridian. If the emperor doesn't believe it, check the blood of the child. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4921. Gong Ziyu's voice resounded in the void battlefield, and all Yanxian who knelt on the ground let out a sigh of relief. As long as the emperor can be verified, they will certainly follow. All Yanxian could see that this true shadow of Emperor Wuyang was actually sealed for too long, so he didn't know the identity of young Master Yu. Looking at the colorful divine blood sprinkled in the void, the true shadow of Zhen Wuyang was doubtful and looked at Gong Ziyu solemnly. The corners of his eyebrows twitched, and the cut he made on his wrist just a moment ago was a bit big, causing the blood to flow out, not slowly, but a blowout. If this continues, I am afraid it will become weak after a while. The emperor, you can find out after checking it. Gong Ziyu said nervously, stretching out his hand. Zhen Wuyang's true shadow did not hesitate anymore, and with a wave of his palm, he fetched a drop of divine blood. A drop of colorful, divine blood lies in the palm of his hand, condensed from an unknown aura that is above the heavens. Zhen Wuyang looked at his hand. The blood of the gods throbbed like a swallow leaping happily, and in a blink of an eye it directly entered the true shadow, moisturizing the true shadow. Retracting his palm, Zhen Wuyang took a deep breath. His eyes softened when he looked at Gong Ziyu. "You said you were my third son?" Gong Ziyu was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Back to the emperor. I am the third son under your seat, Gong Ziyu." Zhen Wuyang heard the words. His original soft eyes suddenly became sharp again, like two heavenly paths. The directly pressed young man, Yu Chong, couldn't kneel down. Then why do you want to kill your eldest brother? The cold sweat came out again in an instant, but he quickly handed over and made a bitter and deep enmity. And he murmured, "The emperor, you don't know? Although the eldest brother is the eldest brother, young master Yen has never done a thing that the eldest brother should do. He was brutal to our 6 brothers. A matter of contravention. 5th young master Mo, he sent Yen Xian to kill. Poor 5th brother, his head was cut off, and Xian Yuan was crushed." Gong Ziyu stood up and said, eyes full of tears, and then couldn't help crying. Zhen Wuyang Zhening, who heard this incident, was so shocked that he couldn't help clenching his palms under the Chinese clothes. Then he murmured, "I have 7 sons. Zheng Heir actually gave birth to 7 sons for me." The corners of young master Yes' mouth twitched. It seemed that he had brewed so many emotions, Zhen Wuyang didn't even notice. Soon, Zhen Wuyang's Zhening returned to his mind, and his brows frowned. If, as he said, the 5th son was killed by Gongzi Yen, then I am afraid that today's affairs will be extremely troublesome. The true shadow left by this true Wuyang in the peak period could not be kept for too long, and it was even slowly dissipating. So soon, Zhen Wuyang looked at Jian Wushuang, who was kneeling in the void covered in blood, and asked, "Yenna, what he said is the truth, but you send Yen Xian to kill the 5th son under my seat." Of being hit by the supreme heavenly Tao in Sangyu Bell was so severe that Jian Wushuang still couldn't speak at this moment, and the Sun Yu, who was on the opposite side, saw this scene and hurriedly said, "The emperor, you are mistaken. He is not the Sun Yen. The one behind you is the Sun Yen." Zhen Wuyang was startled when he heard the words and subconsciously looked behind him, only to see that besides Jian Wushuang, there was a handsome young man standing behind him. With eyes facing each other, Zhen Wuyang frowned soon. Little Emperor immediately bowed, slowly, "Yenner, I have seen the emperor." He didn't say much and directly stretched out his palm and placed it on Xiao Daijin's forehead to probe. Soon, Zhen Wuyang's eyes flashed with sadness and pain. The special physique of the little emperor could not be concealed at all. "So, Yenner, your physique." Zhen Wuyang couldn't speak any more, turned around lonely, and looked at Jian Wushuang, who had recovered. "Then which son are you again?" "The emperor. It's wrong. He is not the emperor at all, but the official of the emperor." Gong Ziyu hurriedly corrected. When Zhen Wuyang heard this, his brows condensed, and he immediately took out a divine blood from Jian Wushuang's body. The mystery of the divine blood is changeable, showing a hazy color, making it difficult for Yen Xian to observe its core. In Zhen Wuyang's palm, Jian Wushuang's blood was also pulsating, seeming to have some unknown familiarity and tentativeness, but it did not blend into Zhen Wuyang's true shadow, but kept walking. "Why, I have a very strong sense of familiarity." Looking at the profound blood in his hand that seemed to be protected by some kind of breath, Zhen Wuyang's Zhen couldn't help but set out to relieve that breath. But soon he was surprised to find that he could not undo the restriction on this drop of blood. Zhen Wuyang's eyes became serious in an instant. He looked at Jian Wushuang and asked again, "You really are not my emperor? Why do I feel a familiar feeling in you?" Jian Wushuang was at a loss. It has only been a few decades since he came to Dianhuan from the Divine Power universe. But before that, he had not had any intersection with the entire Desiyu and the heavenly court of Zhenwuyang. Being able to feel the familiar feeling from him is really tantamount to fantasy. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to deny, the little emperor who hadn't spoken for a long time said, "The emperor, he is indeed not your emperor." Zhen Wuyang heard the words and stopped speaking, but the confusion in his eyes deepened. The aura exuding from Jian Wushuang's body feels too familiar to him, like a certain cognitive feeling that is constantly cutting. The young man standing on the opposite side, watching this stagnant scene, couldn't help but secretly worry. Then he gritted his teeth and calm again, and said, "Father, please be the master of the fifth brother, and deprive Gongzi yen of the fairy bones." Void and silent, only this sentence resounded. Depriving the fairy bones, for the little emperor who is unable to practice and has no fairy roots, is completely stripping away his last fairy road. Once the fairy bone peels off, he will fall in a very short period of time, and there is no way to reverse it. Gongzi, you wanted Xiao Dijuan to fall completely. After hearing this sentence, various complex emotions flowed in Zhen Wuiyang's eyes. In the end, he looked at Xiao. "Yenna, have you done anything like that?" Little Emperor Junqing smiled coldly. His eyes calmed to the extreme. "The Emperor, my son's personality has never changed since he was young. Whether you believe it or not, I don't bother to do this kind of thing. Even if I am incomplete and unable to practice, I still never put them in my eyes, and naturally I will not argue with them." Chapter 49:22. When Xiao Dijuan said this, only a sneer remained in his eyes, and whoever has done that kind of thing, only who knows it in his own mind. After hearing this, Gong Ziyu only felt hot in his ears. He gritted his teeth and said, "You are still arguing. The Emperor, you must never listen to his side words. I am a one-sided word, then you are not a one-sided word. Of course, if you have evidence, you might as well put it up and verify it on the spot." Xiao said coldly, not giving way. After hearing this sentence, "Young master," you gritted his teeth secretly. Naturally, he couldn't produce evidence. Because young master Mo died too hastily, the mysterious man who killed young master Mo did not leave any evidence at the scene. Even if the evidence was left, with the complete destruction of Baitian Xianzhou, it no longer exists. In this stagnant atmosphere, Zhen Wuyang looked at Gong Ziyu, then waved his hand. "Stop talking about this matter. You take your seat, Yan Xian, and leave." Gong Ziyu was taken aback, and then hurriedly said, "The Emperor, how is this?" Without finishing a sentence, Zhen Wuyang suddenly released unparalleled coercion, overwhelming everything. Under this coercion, Yan Xian couldn't get a foothold, and almost disappeared directly. "Well, the Emperor, we will leave now." Gong Ziyu, who was kneeling in the void and could hardly lift his head, said with difficulty. Zhen Wuyang didn't look at him anymore, and directly waved his palm to remove the pressure. The relieved young master, you let out a sigh, hiding his resentment in his heart, and then quickly left the void battlefield with less than 50 Yan Xian. At this point, the entire void battlefield was finally calmed down, and the true shadow of Zhen Wuyang was about to dissipate. Countless stars emerged from behind him, and then disappeared into the void. This true shadow that had been sealed in the ring by Zhen Wuyang from an unknown time was about to dissipate. Yenner, the real shadow of Zhen Wuyang, was full of guilt and reluctance at the moment. He stretched out his palm to touch Xiao Daijin's cheek, but Xiao subconsciously avoided his palm, then nodded and bowed his head. A touch of loneliness flashed in Zhen Wuyang's eyes, but then he recovered his calm, and finally the emperor body slowly dissipated. As he dissipated, he suddenly said, "Yenner, I'm sorry for my father." Little Emperor raised his head. His eyes were confused, but he could not find the answer in the end. Accompanied by the true shadow of Zhen Wuyang completely disappeared. The void battlefield was completely dead. Jian Wushuang, who had recovered a little bit, let out a sigh of relief. If it weren't for the appearance of true Wuyang, true shadow, he would have already turned into blood in that Sangyu Bell at this moment. And Xiao Dijuan stood there, seeming to recall the scene that happened just now. "Humph, Sun Yan, do you think you can escape?" At this time, an angry shout resounded from the depths of the void, and then the chaotic void was illuminated, and the evangelists headed by Gong Ziyu did not leave but turned back. At this moment, his eyes are full of anger, and he can't wait to swallow up the little emperor. Jian Wushuang secretly said a terrible cry. He didn't expect that, young master, you would be so bold that he even dared to return. At this moment, he hasn't even recovered half of it. It is probably a difficult task to deal with these dozens of immortals, and young Master Yu, who has endless means. If young Master Yu offered another piece of Wanggu immortal device, he would be really powerless to return to heaven. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang looked at Xiao Jundeo. You better go. I must be really unable to stand it here. Xiao heard this and smiled and said, the reason why I turned back is to replace you. Now you are driving me away, but it's too unreasonable. Listen to me, you can no longer stay. Even if young Master Ziyu catches me, he doesn't dare to do anything to me. You should leave first. Want to leave? Young Master Yu grinned and pointed to Jian Wushuang. None of you guys want to leave here alive today. Except for young Master Yan, I will kill all the rest. Nua, all the Yanxian promised. And at the same time, they released the Yanlabi training surrounded from all directions. It seems that I can't leave if I want to go. Jian Wushuang sighed softly, and an invisible sword was quietly condensed in his palm. Seeing this long sword came out, all Yanxians were afraid. They all escaped from Jian Wushuang's sword, so naturally they did not dare to underestimate Jian Wushuang. Under his sword, Yanxian trembled. It is the first time that every Yanxian has dealt with that terrible kendo. Before that, none of them had seen such a terrible opponent who could use kendo, but they have orders and can only bite the bullet and challenge, combining the power of 50 immortals, layer upon layer of majestic and surging barriers. Chao Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan surrounded. Jian Wushuang, who is far from recovering, may be difficult to fight. He estimated that if he could release 2 sword intents at most, he would be exhausted. When the barriers around his body were almost thick to a certain level, Jian Wushuang, who was originally calm, suddenly changed his Bodis aura like a real sword completely out of its sheath. Thousands of sword intent loomed around, full of a sense of incomparable killing. The next moment, he held an invisible sword and dropped a straight cut. Wushuang Kendo, Zingao Heijianyani, the first style. Star. As the starting sword of the entire spectrum of Wushuang Kendo, Xing is the most vigorous sword, full of awe-inspiring. It's just that this mediocre straight cut has broken countless strengths. The infinite sword intent rushed and vented wildly, and nearly 100 ons burst into it. Under this sword, even the void shook, and the barrier that combined the power of 50 immortals was directly cut through a gap, and then it broke out of control. Seeing this scene, Gong Ziyu was shocked. Quickly block it for me. If anyone dares to let him go today, I will strip you alive. All Yanxians were horrified, but in the end they bit their heads and pushed them up. At this moment, each of them completely released the power of Yanxian, trying to trap Jian Wushuang and the others. They did it. This sword was originally Jian Wushuang's exhausted sword, and the successor was weak and unable to escape. The infinite sword intent dissipated, looking at Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan, and the thin purple robe, who were besieged by Yanli. Gong Ziyu couldn't help but smile. After 6 days of destruction, the young master was captured. That is the ultimate goal of this battle. However, when the smile on Gong Ziyu's face had not dissipated, he saw several streamer-like figures rushing from here right in front of him, the speed of which was even instantaneous. Not good, there is a change. His eyelids twitched, and then he could see that everyone who came here was actually a fairy. There are a total of 7 bodies with a powerful body, walking slowly like the sharpest sword intent, walking towards Gong Ziyu. He stepped back subconsciously, then gritted his teeth. Chapter 49:23. With Diqing as the head, the 7 Yangtzeans descended. Chun Qing, Chuanqiu, Cui Jing, Zhao Ting, Wei Liujia, Fengshan, none of them were absent. "My lord, Bangshan is late." A blast resounded through the void. Fengshan shouted angrily, his bare chest, like a true peak, swept towards Jian Wushuang. Immediately afterwards, Chun Qing, Spring, and Autumn went forward one by one with an unrelenting momentum. Today, they have all returned to their heyday. The heavy damage suffered before has been restored to the peak period by Diqing. Rank 9 Dian, Immortal, was still terrifying. Although Diqing Yuan did not recover, but they still easily recovered. Their battle was just to rescue Jian Wushuang. Boom! Fengshan, who looked like a savage bull, directly tore a crack in the Yanli barrier with all his strength and then slammed into it. "Why are you here?" Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang was both surprised and delighted. "Of course I will come later, or the Lord is in danger." Fengshan flushed, and he desperately stuck in the middle of the crack, not allowing it to close again. "Sir, I can't hold it anymore, so hurry away." Chun Qing followed closely. He directly drew out the real sword from his waist and lay it directly in the middle of the crack. Then he said, "Brother Sword, little Emperor, go." Jian Wu doubled his head, no longer hesitating, and directly pulled up Xiao Dijuan and the thin purple robe and rushed out of the crack. "Damn it, kill all of them, not one." Young Master Ziyu was already completely frustrated, damaged a Sangyu bell, and got into so many seats, Yen Xian, yet he couldn't capture the next young Master Yen. He could no longer remain calm. Only the remaining 40 or so Yangtzeans rushed forward again, knowing that this extremely unequal battle had quietly reversed. It seems that there are only 7 ordinary Yangtzeans, and the remaining 6 Yangtzeans except Diqing are enough for them to drink a pot. Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, and the others all had 2 or 3 pin pills in their mouths at this moment. Once they were injured, swallowing them directly would restore most of their physical strength in an instant. After being led by Chun Qing and Fengshan, Chuanqiu sent a large number of pin pills, all of which were used to repair the heavy damage. After Jian Wushuang quickly stuffed Xiao Dijuan and thin purple robe a few, the rest of his brain was stuffed into his mouth. Nearly 10 pin pills were put into the mouth and directly turned into violent energy that impacted the limbs. Unexpectedly, he almost burst Jian Wushuang's fairy body. All injuries were immediately cleared and restored to peak state. At this moment, Jian Wushuang only felt that the meridians in Xian's body were about to explode, and he needed to vent out. His eyes were crimson, and the surging patterns all over his body had almost doubled or more. And then he looked at Gong Ziyu in the distance. The 4 eyes were facing each other, a great crisis between life and death, which shocked Gong Ziyu. The next moment, Jian Wushuang went straight to him. The void collapsed, and a crimson streamer cut the void forward. Unable to restrain the restless Jian Wushuang in the immortal's body, he probably didn't even know it. He had already unconsciously opened the way of killing. "Quickly stop her," Gong Ziyu said in shock, and at the same time backed away quickly. Nearly 10 Yen Xian arrived first, holding their respective forces, trying to hold Jian Wushuang. But at this time, he is no longer in the previously unrecovered state. Jian Wushuang in his heyday was already able to fight the 3rd-rank Dian Immortal, let alone them. The praying man-arm is a car, and he does not have his own strength. Jian Wushuang, who was in charge of the way of killing, didn't even turn into an invisible sword, and slammed a heavy punch directly. This heavy punch is enough to easily destroy the universe. The Scarlet Fist and the wind smashed out, and the first Yen Xian who came to greet him was too late to make any sound. He was directly blasted into blood mist and disappeared. Moreover, the fist's strength and the wind did not diminish, after smashing the first Yanxian, another 6 Yanxian killed. Boom, boom. The blood mist was permeating, and there were only 3 Yanxians who stepped forward to block them. Gong Ziyu was already shocked, and he didn't plan to stay here anymore. He turned and flew over the immortal formation that was far away. Go away! Jian Wushuang, who had been slightly changed by the way of killing, was furious, facing the Yanxian who had less than 30 in front of him. He chose to rush over. Boom, boom. Each punch is enough to destroy a source of immortality. Jian Wushuang is like a demon who surpasses the heavens and slays all immortals neatly. All Yanxian was so vulnerable in front of him, even unable to defend, they were smashed to the Xian Yuan and fell miserably. It was only a few dozen breaths of time, and only 7 of the 30 Yanxian were killed. They were all terrified, no longer dared to resist, and fled straight into the wild. "Wanna go?" Jian Wushuang sneered coldly. He raised his palm, and suddenly thousands of chain-like scarlet light beams scattered in all directions. The 7 immortals fleeing in the wild and wild were instantly caught, and then dragged to him. My lord, let me wait. We don't want to be an enemy of my lord. It's all because of the 3 Highness. Without finishing a sentence, the 7 Yanxians were directly strangled into pieces by the scarlet chain. Jian Wushuang was never soft on his enemies. As for letting go of his life, it was a fantasy. After slaying all Yanxian, he directly flew towards the young Master Yu, who was about to flee. The murderous intent in his eyes is great, and he has listed it as a must-kill target deep in his heart. Seen getting closer and closer to the fairy formation, Gong Ziyu let out a sigh of relief. However, just as he was about to rush into the immortal formation, a great crisis of life and death surged in his mind. He did not even think about it, and tried his best to hide away. Boom! The power of Scarlet came over the sky and directly destroyed the fairy formation. Along with the violent force of the sky, Jian Wushuang, whose eyes sinking like water walked slowly, cold sweat falling from the sideburns. Gong Ziyu stood there, shaking uncontrollably. Judging from the previous style of acting, Jian Wushuang, who had cut the grass and roots and was extremely cold, obviously did not intend to let him leave. He knew with great confidence that Jian Wushuang would not be afraid of him because he was the son of the 3rd emperor and would not dare to start. It is precisely because of this that Gong Ziyu has fallen into despair. He never thought that one day he would actually be so close to death. Out of fear of falling, Gong Ziyu trembled. No, you can't do it. I am the 3rd emperor under the emperor's seat. If you do it to me, you will definitely pay the price by then. As long as you let me go, I will completely forget everything that happened today. Chapter 49-24. Only Gulong was left in Jian Wushuang's eyes, looking at him with a smile. Only, as long as you don't kill me, I promise you will never do anything against you from now on. Gong Ziyu has completely abandoned the arrogant belonging to the emperor, and almost begged, I am the 3rd brother of Gong Ziyan. He is my emperor brother. He will definitely not let you move me. When he said this, he even began to shamelessly call out the name of Xiao Dijuan, but he didn't know that Jian Wushuang was not affiliated with Xiaodaijin at all, and even their relationship was equal. Wanting to use Xiaodaijin to suppress him is no different from idiotic dreams. Young Master Yu pulled his throat and called out Xiao Daijin's name loudly, but then Jian Wushuang pointed like a knife and cut off his entire left arm with a palm. Divine blood spurted out. The fairy body shattered. Gong Ziyu's screams resounded, clutching his broken arm and staggering back. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold, and he had no intention of letting him go. If it weren't for the appearance of the true shadow of the emperor, then Song Yuzhong would definitely be able to kill Jian Wushuang. It is precisely because of this that he gave birth to a murderous heart. In this unending situation, once young Master Ziyu is released, then I am afraid Jian Wushuang will be extremely passive in the future. So Gong Ziyu must die. At this moment, he didn't even consider the existence of Zhen Wuyang and Heavenly Court. The palm that was surging with scarlet power fell again, and Gong Ziyu's right leg was directly cut off, and the blood spurted out. Without the support of one leg, Gong Ziyu suddenly sat in the chaotic void, looking at Jian Wushuang with a gray face. He had seen the decisive killing intent from Jian Wushuang Sen's cold eyes, and there was no room for recovery. Gong Ziyu had regretted it to the extreme. He shouldn't have made the idea of cleaning the battlefield and capturing Xiao alive. Without this idea, it would not end up in this situation. Don't kill me, I don't want to die. I can give you whatever you want. The sun's feathers are like ashes. Emperor's luck, Emperor's luck. I will use the Emperor's luck to replace my life. Can it? Jian Wushuang was too lazy to listen to him anymore, and the killing aura in his hand was so strong that it turned into a long and narrow blood blade. In the next moment, he raised the blood blade in his hand and cut it down without any hesitation. The young man's eyes are about to split. His face is like ashes. However, the blood blade was not cut down, as if it had been hindered, hovering over his head. Jian Wushuang turned his head and looked behind him. Di Qing had already come to him, casting a spell to stop his movement. Di Qing placed his palm on Jian Wushuang's shoulder and patted gently, and then whispered, "Leave it to me to do it," he said, and then walked slowly to young Master Yu, who was shaking like chaff. Gong Ziyu, rumming amnesty. Save me, I can give you all the luck of the Emperor." The one who responded to him was Jin Yu, who was extremely sharp. Each golden feather is enough to break the heavens and penetrate any super-universe. Thousands of golden feathers passed through, directly shooting Gong Ziyu's fairy body into powder, and even Xian Yuan was completely crushed. The third emperor under the seat of Zhen Wuyang, Gong Ziyu, died. Void wailing. All the luck belonging to the emperor returned to the universe and could no longer be collected. Seeing this scene, Xiao Daijin's figure was shocked, and he slowly backed up a few steps. If he hadn't been dragged by the thin purple robe, he would collapse. Gong Ziyu died in front of his eyes. Various emotions changed in his eyes, and finally closed his eyes tightly. The magnificent and majestic 10-pointed wings slowly moved behind Di Qing, reflecting the chaos and void. Under the random blow of rank 9 Dian immortal, even the emperor was easily destroyed. The invincible sun, you fell completely. Putting away the way of killing, Jian Wushuang has recovered his calmness. He looked at Di Qing and slowly said, "Why do you want to do this?" Putting away the 10 wings, Di Qing calmly said, "Because he is the emperor of Zhen Wuyang. Once you behead him, you will definitely suffer Zhen Wuyang's revenge, and you will never survive from him." Having said this, he paused and said, "I am different. Even if he shoots me, I can protect myself." Jian Wushuang was moved in his heart, and he understood that the reason why Di Qing did this was to protect him. Immediately, he solemnly said, "Thank you, I owe you once. Between you and me, there is no need to say thank you." Di Qing raised his eyebrows and smiled, and then said, "It's just that, next, I'm afraid I will be away for a while." Just when Jian Wushuang was about to ask him where he was going, an unspeakable aura of grandeur quietly enveloped the entire void battlefield. That kind of breath was magnificent to the extreme. Wherever that breath was shrouded, the years stopped passing and were completely sealed. The broken heaven was reshaped, and the chaotic void was quickly repaired. Jian Wushuang, who was completely unable to move half a minute, his eyes widened, and he looked forward in disbelief. Everything is going back. What kind of existential power should be able to complete the retrospective? The luck and aura that had originally dissipated began to condense like stars. Soon, under the condensing of the stars and streamers, a figure that could not be more familiar appeared again. The dead Sun Yu, who had been killed by Diqing and was irreversible, was actually reborn. At the same time, the chaotic void was torn apart, and a series of figures that were so powerful that they were indescribable appeared from the end of the void. They all carry various colored wheels of light on their backs, and it is hoped that the ancient heavens will circulate in them. Only rank 6 Dayan Immortal can condense the light wheel, and they are all the veteran Dayan immortal under the seat of Zhen Wuyang. For each one, the minimum is 9 turns. Even the newly born Tao of heaven crawls under their feet. And at the front of these elders, Dayan Immortal was a figure with a tired complexion and no aura. Although he was extremely ordinary, Yu read www.akanshu.com but let all the elders behind him surrender, all the violent power, aura, and even the heavens on the void battlefield can't get close to him. Lord of Heaven, Emperor Zhen Wuyang is here. Jian Wushuang felt that the blood in the meridians was solidified, and in front of that kind of breath, he couldn't even breathe. Coming to the battlefield of the void, Emperor Zhen Wuyang looked tired, but still carried the supreme authority. Seeing Gong Ziyu, who opened his eyes and looked confused, his expression was extremely blue. Emperor Father, am I still alive? Gong Ziyu, who had recovered from the confusion, was extremely excited when he saw Zhen Wuyang's presence. However, what awaited him was not a concerned inquiry, but a heavy slap. The emperor was angry and directly drove him far away. Chapter 49:25. Not long after reshaping the immortal body, the young Master Yu, who was in the weakest state, had his 7 orifices gushing with blood, and was almost killed by this slap again. Then Zhen Wuyang stretched out his hand again and shook him directly back in front of him. Covering the divine blood pouring out of his nose with his hand, the Sun Yu said timidly, "The Emperor, why do you want to beat the child?" Taking a deep breath, Zhen Wuyang pointed to the entire broken void and said in a deep voice, "Did you do it here?" Hearing this, he suddenly fainted a little. "Yes, it's not just me." When Zhen Wuyang heard this, he anxiously wanted to pump him a few more times, but eventually he retracted his palm. The magnificent and terrifying aura on the void battlefield disappeared. Jian Wushuang and others panted, and then all backed away. The breath that Zhen Wuyang dropped was too vast. Even Diqing, who was the 9-ranked Great Yen Immortal, had no way to compete, let alone them. Jian Wushuang's temples were sweating like syrup, and if Zhen Wuyang were to kill him in pain, he would never escape. Immediately afterwards, Zhen Wuyang slowly swept over them, and after staying on Jian Wushuang and Diqing for a while, he quickly looked at Xiaodagen again. "Yenner, tell me what's going on," he said solemnly. "The whole void is broken into this way. It's not just a battle." Little Emperor did not hesitate when he heard the words. Dang even told Zhen Wuyang what had happened. This war involving more than 1,000 Yangtzeans was the most massive battle ever since Zhen Wuyang Emperor opened up the Great Division domain. The complexity of the forces involved and the widespread of immortals are cut off from the past and the present, so that when Xiao Dijuan recounted such a scene of a tragic war, Zhen Wuyang, including the patriarchs behind him, was shocked. An immortal is an existence of absolute status in the ordinary universe. They transcend the way of heaven beyond the shackles of 99%. Even if you look at Dayanhuan, they are all absolute existences. But at the moment, they died in batches in the void battlefield, just because of this inexplicable battle. When Zhen Wuyang and a group of elders de Yanxian heard about the equal forces on both sides, they were truly shocked. With less than 200 Yanxian, he resisted the attack of nearly 2,000 Yenxian and 3 Dianxian, and completely saved the Six-Day Realm. How can that be? 1 dozen 20 can still keep the Six-Day Realm? At the end, Xiao Dijuan looked at Jian Wushuang and Diqing and said, if it weren't for their help, the Six-Day Realm would have been destroyed, and even I would have fallen into this melee. So he's it. He pointed angrily at young Master Yu, who was kneeling in front of Zhen Wuyang. Gong Ziyu suddenly sat in the void and waved his hands repeatedly. No, not just me. This matter has nothing to do with me. Zhen Wuyang took a deep breath. The Dihui emanating from his body couldn't help but fluctuate. This is really horrible. And such a fierce battle erupted in just a short time after he left the Six-Day Realm. This battle, if it were placed in any position of the Great Division region without being prevented, would be extremely terrifying destruction. Fortunately, this war has completely subsided. Zhen Wuyang's eyes were as sinking as water, and he almost swallowed young Master Hanyu. No, the Emperor, it has nothing to do with me at this time. It has nothing to do with me. He kept backing away, with horror in his eyes. But Zhen Wuyang didn't start pumping him again, but said in a deep voice, you can never mobilize so many immortals. Now tell me who else is besides you. Hearing this, Gong Ziyu had hesitation and struggle in his eyes, as if he wanted to keep this secret. But the struggle and hesitation in his heart only existed for a moment. And then he said, going back to the Emperor, it's the second brother and the sixth brother. Hearing this sentence, Zhen Wuyang was furious. Okay. You 3 have such bold guts to mobilize so many immortals to kill the elder brother. Now, killing my brother, is it going to kill the Emperor in the future? His face was gloomy and terrible, and he was obviously really angry. When the Sun Yu heard this, he immediately trembled as sifting chaff. The Emperor, it is definitely not what you think. There is a reason for all of this. Forcibly resisting the anger rising from the bottom of his heart, Zhen Wuyang gave him a disappointed look. From now on, you will stay for a full year. The mantra of the Emperor, the way of heaven, was established, and countless ways of the Emperor and heaven were born directly at this moment. A series of mysterious dense patterns flowed in the void, and each of them represented the Emperor's way of heaven. The entire emptiness was shrouded by Dihui, and the emperors and lords descended. Gong Ziyu was so frightened that he couldn't add to it. Having been banned for a year, that is simply unimaginable. A Huanyan represents that even the celestial plane constructed by heavenly Tao will be extinguished, turning into star fragments and disappearing into the boundless void. One Huanyan represents that a monk is enough to grow to the terrifying point of becoming an immortal. One Huanyan almost represents infinite years, and it is the alternate node of the newly born Tiandao instead of the old one. Gong Ziyu was imprisoned for a full year, which was the most severe punishment. No, not the Emperor. Everything is the Son of the Sun, who made me do this. I am innocent. Gong Ziyu shouted in despair, but the Emperor's heavenly way had already come down, like chains, instantly imprisoning him. Then the void collapsed to reveal an unknown space, and Emperor Tiandao directly dragged young Master Yu into it and sealed it up. The void was wiped out, and the singularity that belonged to the Emperor's heavenly path was slowly moving. In that unknown space, the third son of the Emperor, Ziyu, was sealed and banned for a full year. The void was silent. All the elders, Dianxian, shook their heads and sighed, then cast their eyes on Jian Wushuang and Diqing. Soon the elder de Yenxian recognized Diqing, who was beside Jian Wushuang. Why, how could be him? That ancestral golden crow, didn't he already die at that time? All the elders Dianxian began to whisper together. At this time, Emperor Zhen Wuyang noticed Diqing. Talk about it. Why are you here? Invisibly, the emperor's prestige came down, pressing all the immortals to be a little unable to support it. Di Qing secretly gritted his teeth. He was fully fighting against the coercion of the emperor. At this time, the little emperor stepped forward and stood in front of Jian Wushuang and Di Qing, and said loudly, if it weren't for their full resistance, I'm afraid that the Lutian realm and I would have died in the void. Father, you can ask me anything you want, and I will answer them for them. Zhen Wuyang wanted to speak again. He also knew that this battle was too tragic and involved too many forces, and it was precisely the entire six-day realm that was a complete victim. Chapter 49:26. Without the existence of Jian Wushuang, Di Qing and others facing the Yanxian army, there is only one way to destroy the six-day realm. Therefore, Zhen Wuyang did not feel embarrassed at this time. The battle to destroy the six-day realm was a premeditated war. If it is not investigated, it may leave the source of disaster. After a moment of contemplation, Zhen Wuyang spoke again. Gongziyu, who have you killed it? Jian Wushuang's heart sank when he heard this. As Di Qing said, Zhen Wuyang would really get to the bottom. Just when Xiao Dijuan was about to speak, Jian Wushuang took a step ahead of him and said calmly, I killed him. All the elder Dainxian turned their eyes to him, as if they had some regrets in their eyes. Di Qing was startled slightly, then turned to look at Jian Wushuang, and various emotions flashed in his eyes. Immediately afterwards, Zhen Wuyang said solemnly, Then what is the crime of beheading the emperor? Emperor Majesty put pressure on him. He gritted his teeth and resisted not letting himself fall. I only know that if you don't kill him, I will be in danger. The long sword was in the air. A sword smashed away the emperor's coercion, and blocking Jian Wushuang's body. The little emperor raised the long sword in his hand and pointed it straight at Zhen Wuyang. Little emperor, put down your sword. All the elders Dainxian stepped forward to put pressure on the little emperor at this moment. But he was still unmoved, holding up the true sword in his hand, pointed at Zhen Wuyang with the tip of the sword, and did not give in a step. Do you dare to do it to me? Zhen Wuyang said in a deep voice. At this moment, Di Hui shined to the extreme. Under Emperor Hui, Chen Qing, and the others all snorted, and involuntarily a ray of divine blood came out from the corner of their mouth. The extremely weak little monarch retreated a few steps, his ears and nose bleed out of blood, but he blocked Jian Wushuang again, raised his true sword, and aimed at Zhen Wuyang again. Then he said in a hoarse voice, Why not dare? A touch of disappointment flashed in Zhen Wuyang's eyes, and then he casually raised his hand, and heaven put pressure on it. The real sword in Xiadaijin's hand broke into hundreds of pieces at the sound, and his figure was directly suppressed by the emperor's heaven. Let go of me, Zhen Wuyang! He roared, but there was no way to break free of this restraint. Facing the little emperor directly calling the emperor's name, Zhen Wuyang didn't care, but instead turned his gaze to Jian Wushuang. Really, you? At this time, a lazy voice resounded abruptly in the void, and Di Qing walked to the front of Zhong Yanxian. Hey, look at me. I can kill the emperor, and scrupulously. In this entire big division, apart from me, I am afraid there is no second immortal. After saying this sentence, Di Qing resolutely burst out the wings of 10 directions. In an instant, the magnificent power that belonged to the Nineth rank great Yanxian swayed in the void. The magnificent 10-party wings are blooming, and the clear ancestral veins are also stretched for thousands of miles at this moment. The golden crow treasure screamed, the sacred magnificence to the extreme. Di Qing is actively fighting Zhen Wuyang. Even though he is the 9th rank Dayan immortal facing the emperor, he is not even worth mentioning. Just a wisp of emperor's luck can easily kill any Dayan immortal. Even Di Qing is no exception. If you want to describe the distance between them, it would be Machin and Hao Yue even more incomparable. But it was such a grandiose and proud truth that Chen Wuyang didn't even mention the slightest interest in fighting. He just looked at Di Qing with some interested eyes. "Golden Crow, you never seem to be afraid of me?" Di Qing smiled slightly and looked directly at Chen Wuyang Dao. "To be honest with you, even if you become the emperor, I was really not afraid at the beginning. Even now, I am not afraid because I am afraid that it will not solve any problems. So we removed such an unstable factor from the blood." "Are you really afraid of me?" Zhen Wuyang narrowed his eyes slightly. Dai Qing's eyes narrowed slightly. Of course. The atmosphere was deadly silent. For the first time, Dian Immortal dared to confront the emperor. In the eyes of those elders, Dian Immortal was an extremely strange scene. Zhen Wuyang has fought and killed all his life, and he has killed several emperors before opening up the current big division domain. But now, facing this guy who could just be crushed to death, he didn't rush to do it. "Sure enough, your Xinqing is still the same as before. As the Golden Crow ancestral vein, you are rumored to have 9 true fate. I'm afraid this is the reason why you dare to confront me." "Zhen Wuyang Emperor," Yu said, "what if I destroy your 9 true lives now?" Di Qing heard this, and his heart tightened slightly. He had hidden the deepest trump card, but he didn't expect Zhen Wuyang to know it. He now has only 7 true lives left. If Zhen Wuyang is determined to condemn him, I am afraid that he will fall completely today. Thinking of this, Di Qing gritted his teeth and said nothing. But Zhen Wuyang didn't seem to want to know Di Qing's answer either. He directly stretched out his index finger in the void. In an instant, all the general trends that Di Qing had built were like a mirror flower, directly broken. Di Qing's mouth was full of blood, and his eyes widened to the maximum. Zhen Wuyang looked at him and said in a deep voice, "Beheading the emperor is a capital crime for you, but if you have other unavoidable ideas, this emperor will save you from death. But immediately I will exile you to the borderless sea for 1 year." As soon as the emperor's mantra came out, the way of heaven appeared. Layers of chains then bound Di Qing. After Di Qing heard the penalty, his expression changed drastically. "A Chinese year. Do you plan to let this seat be completely lost in it?" But he only left this sentence, and his body completely disappeared into the void. Jian Wushuang got up and pursued, but in the end he couldn't catch it. Exile from the endless sea. In just 6 words, it contains endless horror and coldness. Chang Duoling, who killed 9 heavens with his own power, was once exiled to the sea of no edge. But he didn't know how to escape, and he was extremely cautious about the endless sea. Where the unknown lies is probably the real purgatory. Gong Ziyu was imprisoned for a full year, and Di Qing was banished from the sea of endless. Everything seems to be just the beginning. Zhen Wuyang slowly swept across the only remaining Yanxian on the void battlefield, and finally stopped his gaze on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang also did not evade, even looking at him coldly. For some reason, Zhen Wuyang felt a very familiar and unfamiliar feeling when he stared at that pair of eyes. At the same time, there is a real feeling of sitting on an equal footing. This surprised Zhen Wuyang's heart. Why would such a small Yanxian give him such a feeling? An existence that does not even belong to a realm has already made Zhen Wuyang vigilant at this moment. That kind of vigilance is unprecedented for Zhen Wuyang. Chapter 49:27. Even in the age of reverence, the age of the emperor traversing the ages, there are very few existences that can make him directly feel threatened. This is simply absurd. Zhen Wuyang directly discarded the absurdity that had arisen in his heart and returned to normal. At the same time, he was a little puzzled. What exactly is the familiar feeling that Jian Wushuang exudes? Why is it familiar? After thinking about it for a while, Zhen Wuyang didn't intend to find out. He only came to see you and noticed the abnormal fluctuations here, so he rushed over. Now that the crisis of the six-day realm has been lifted, he has to return to the heavens to deal with some hidden dangers. Reaching out his hand to dissipate the emperor heavenly Tao that had bound the little emperor, Zhen Wuyang wanted to say nothing, and finally did not say anything, leading a group of elder Dianxian to leave. The originally shattered and chaotic void was repaired by the emperor heavenly Tao again, and there was no trace of the trauma of the war, and it was as clean as if nothing had happened. Even the universe that was affected and destroyed was reshaped, but the billions of creatures in it eventually disappeared. Seeing this clean void flowing with the galaxy, Chun Qing and others were a little lost. Here, a tragic battle took place, nearly 2,000 fairy gods, and 3 of them were buried here. But at this moment, they all disappeared without a trace. With a light cough, Xiao Dijuan slowly came to Jian Wushuang, his eyes dimmed, and said, "I'm sorry." Jian Wushuang shook his head. "It's not to blame you. The matter is here. What I want to think about is how to make up for it. Brother Sword, what are your plans?" "No matter what, I, Chun Qing, will be the first to follow you." Walking out from behind, the Chun Qing Ning said, his eyes firm, "I still have a copy. Fengshan will never back down." Fengshan, who is taller than Chun Qing's figure, said, patting his chest. Then Chuanxiu Chuijing and Wei Liujia also took a step forward at this moment. In addition to firmness, their faces were more determined. However, hesitation flashed in Zhao Ting's eyes, and in the end he did not take a step forward, but stayed in place, reluctantly smiled. Jian Wushuang turned to look at them and said, "What are you doing? The war is over, and there is no fighting. Go back and take care of it." "Brother Sword, is there really nothing to do?" Chun Qing asked. Jian Wushuang nodded. "Of course not. Now your top priority is to recover from your injury, so as not to leave a hidden illness." The war finally ended completely, and nearly 2,000 Yangtzeans were buried in the void battlefield. The six-day realm was finally preserved, but the foundation was completely destroyed, and only 1,000 people were left to repair. The young Master Qian who came to the aid was also badly injured, and now only 3 of the 100 immortals he brought were left. But instead of lamenting, he was extremely excited. With more than 200 Yanxian fighting against more than 2,000 Yanxian and finally defending the six-day realm, this is an impossible battle, but it actually happened in the end. The reason why Gong Ziqian was excited was because he saw the hidden secrets of the six-day realm. His desperate bet this time is a right bet. Getting the bet right means that from now on, no longer need to look at the face of Gong Zijia. His ethereal Xianzhou will be temporarily safe. However, Gong Ziqian is still a little worried at the moment. The six-day realm has now declined, and whether the ethereal Xianzhou can be taken into account in the future is still unknown. Thinking of this, he still regrets it. If he comes a few days late, it would be nice not to catch up with this war. At the end of the war, the top repairers who had been sent far away returned to the six-day realm one after another. Every top repairer, after going through such a big battle, completely transformed into a long one. If you want to survive such a fierce battle, only if you become stronger can you have a chance. The realm of Yanxian is the ultimate goal they are determined to pursue. After 6 days, it returned to silence, still cold. Sitting on the roof of the reconstructed Tiangong, Jian Wushuang was sitting with his eyes closed. In this tragic battle, he gained his strongest sword intent, and his own swordsmanship has reached the stage of perfection. Once Wushuang Kendo is fully integrated, Jian Wushuang will enter the realm of Sword Fairy. By then, I am afraid that he will be enough to fight the 9 turns Yanxian. Jian Wushuang, who had obtained his strongest sword intent, was not happy at the moment. He even sat on the eaves of the heavenly palace without any expression. Countless terrifying powers surged around him, and at the same time he quickly swallowed a few Emperor Pin pills. He is recovering to the peak with all his strength, and even trying to break through. The whole generation of Xiao Gudian's birth was gathering towards him, and the heavens and the earth changed. I don't know how long it took. When Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes, he couldn't help showing a sense of loss in his eyes. Could it be that there is no way to be promoted to Dayan Immortal? Jian Wushuang was indeed attacking Dayan Immortal, but he ultimately failed. The failure this time was far more terrifying than any previous failure to break through. Because this time, the situation is completely different. As an ultra-perfect chaotic creature, his road to breakthrough and promotion is extremely difficult, and once the breakthrough is successful, he will completely crush enemies of the same level. Although the road to breakthrough and promotion is extremely difficult, it is not without road. If you describe every realm as a misty, unknown cloud, although it is impossible to achieve, there is still a way to be understood. But Jian Wushuang now felt that his realm could no longer make a breakthrough, because his realm forward has completely reached the end. After becoming a fairy, there is no realm to break through. A wisp of cold sweat gushed from Jian Wushuang's temples. He didn't expect that his path of promotion would stop in the realm of evolving immortals. As for the realm of day evolving above immortals, he had no perception at all. There was a bit of bitterness in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and he also knew the reason. He came from the universe of divine power and did not belong to Dianhuan's cultivation system at all, even though he cut off the past of Hongqian and gained power. But after all, Xianyuan could not be born. And without Xianyuan, it means that he will never be able to be promoted to Dayan Immortal. There must be other ways. This is definitely not my end. Slowly exhaling a mouthful of muddy breath, Jian Wushuang's eyes gradually became firmer. Since there is no path in front of you, then abruptly blaze a trail. If the road can't even be opened up, it doesn't hurt to ruin the mountain in front of you. However, in the next plan, I am afraid he will be extremely passive. Originally, Jian Wushuang planned to break through the realm of Yanxian with all his strength during this time and reach Dayanxian, but everything failed. Chapter 49:28, The Realm of Dayan Fairyland. He was temporarily out of reach. But this is about his decision to go to the borderless sea. Originally, he planned to break through the realm of Dayan Immortal and go to the sea of wordlessness to find the truth, which would have some chances of winning. But now, everything is full of unknowns. However, even so, Jian Wushuang had already made the decision to go to the borderless sea. Diqing was banished because he was exiled, and bringing him out of it was something he had to do. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang left his depressed mood behind him, and left Xiao Gudian in a flash. In front of Daegu Tiantian Palace, Jian Wushuang had quietly arrived, and he quickly entered the temple under the clouds. The thin purple robe seemed to have been waiting for a long time. Seeing Jian Wushuang coming, he directly greeted him and said, "Master Jian, Xiao Dijuan is a little unwell. I'm afraid I can't see you." Jian Wushuang heard the words and frowned slightly. "I only asked him about one thing." "Master Jian, Xiao Dijuan is a little unwell. I'm afraid I can't see you." The thin purple robe still stood in front of him, obviously not planning to let him in. "I'm afraid he's not sick at all." Jian Wushuang looked straight at the thin purple robe and said, "He doesn't want to see me?" The thin purple robe dodged his eyes slightly, and then said slowly, "Master Sword, in fact, His Highness does not want you to go there." He didn't finish his words, and was interrupted by the little emperor who walked out from the depths of the heavenly palace. "My buddy, you go down." The thin purple robe agreed, and then stepped back. "Come in and sit. I don't want to see you." Xiaodigen said quietly. Jian Wushuang didn't care either. He urgently needed to know how to get to the borderless sea. how to get to the borderless sea. He walked forward quickly and asked straightforwardly. Xiao Dijuan didn't look back, as if thinking about something, and finally said, I don't want you to go there. But, I have to go. Jian Wushuang said the same. Xiao turned around and suddenly stretched out his palms to hold his arms tightly, and then said, A Chinese year is very fast. Can you not go? It only takes a Chinese year, and with his ability, he will be absolutely safe. Jian Wushuang heard the words, pulled away his palm without knowing the trace, shook his head, and said firmly, A year? Too long. Even the heavens are enough to collapse. Dai Qingben was banished in the sea of no sea because of me. I must go and take him out of it. Otherwise, I can't feel at ease. If he didn't do it for me, then it would be me who was banished into the borderless sea at this moment. Little Emperor said in a hoarse voice, But do you know what is imprisoned in the endless sea? Those are the sources of chaos in the old realm. Even my Emperor dare not relax when entering the endless sea. Do you know? I might as well tell you now that once I was exiled into the borderless sea, I was almost sentenced to death. There was no waves in Jian Wu's double-faced color, and he calmly said, Even so, I must go. Then I tell you, if you go in, there is a 99 chance that you will die in it. Xiaodijan's eyes showed tension and solemnity. You must go, he said firmly. Hearing this answer, Xiao Dijuan stopped saying more, as if he had been relieved of most of his strength, and sat on the jade steps. After a while, he said, The sea of no edge is tangible and intangible, and it is a place bounded by nothingness and reality. Even Dian Immortal will be lost in it. There is no real exit to the Sea of Borders, or it is said that only my Emperor knows, but now the key to the Sea of Borders is in your hands. Jian Wushuang heard the words, moved in his heart, and stretched out his hand to take out the golden jade ring containing the true shadow of Emperor Wuyang. This was given to him by Xiao when he went to Domitian and saved his life on the void battlefield. Carefully rubbing the golden jade ring in his hand, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but said, With this, you can go to the borderless sea. Little Emperor nodded. This ring contains the aura of my Emperor and can open that passage. How to use? Follow me. In the void, Jian Wushuang, dressed as a ranger and wearing a large black robe, stood in a very dark place. Beside him, there were only two companions, Xiao Dijuan and Thin Zipeo. The three bodies are like three eternal sculptures, and the void and wind cannot infect them. Has it been decided? Little Emperor turned his head to look at him. Jian Wushuang nodded and said no more. Then he slowly stretched out his palm, and the golden jade ring exuded a unique and magnificent glow in the chaotic void. The next moment, Jian Wushuang threw the ring in his hand into the void. In an instant, the void suddenly collapsed and torn. Thousands of brilliant lights burst out of the golden jade ring, illuminating the vast void. The flowing huamang is the Emperor's way of heaven. They directly tore through the void, forming an endless passage. The river of stars turned, and the dappled stars were shining in the passage. The passage to the borderless sea is here. Ahead is the sea of no edge. Little Emperor said in a weak voice. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then he was about to step into it. At the same time, Xiao Dijuan quietly stretched out his palm and grabbed his right arm, silently looking at him without a word. Don't worry, as long as I don't want to die, I will definitely come back safely. Jian Wushuang said as he looked at him, and then stretched out his palm. Stepping into the passage, with one step, the void oscillated, and then the huge galaxy passage slowly closed. The black robe finally disappeared completely in the passage and was never seen again. The void was smoothed by the gang wind, and everything seemed to have never happened. My buddy, did I harm him? The voice was hoarse and slightly sad. The thin purple robe figure also moved slightly, and after a long time he said, "His Royal Highness, you shouldn't let him in, even if Master Jian is shocking Hong Tianjiao. I am afraid it is impossible to walk out of there alive. After all, there is a completely unknown territory. I regret it. I don't want him to leave." Xiao Dijuan looked at the smooth passage and slowly closed his eyes. The galaxy was surging. Everything was like a river of stars. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the top of the tide and hurried towards the end of the passage. This galaxy channel is not as dangerous as Jian Wushuang thought. It can even be said to be very peaceful, like a quiet river, but the more so, the less careless it is. And it is far from possible that the realm that can make Diqing be so jealous is far from being as calm as it is. With entering the channel, everything is just beginning. Chapter 49-29. Turbulent undercurrents are often hidden under the calm water. Jian Wushuang knew this sentence well, and soon encountered it. He was far from expecting that everything would come so fast that he was caught off guard. Above the thick and ink-like endless waters, a beast with 10 evil reveals roared in anger. In front of this ugly behemoth, there was a sharp eyebrow, and the figure with the Schwana patterns surging all over his body was facing away from it. Jian Wushuang at this moment had a cold face, but his heart had already complained. He never imagined that he would be able to recite to such an extent when he stepped on the spot. Just after falling from the passage, the endless dark sea suddenly separated, and then an ugly beast with 10 heads opened its huge mouth and swallowed it towards him. If it weren't for Jian Wushuang's vigilance, I'm afraid it would have fallen directly into the beast's mouth. Seeing a dark halo on the head of the giant beast in front of him, Jian Wushuang felt his head grow. Because only the Dayan Immortal who is above rank 5 can condense his own aura of growth, which is a symbol of realm. Jian Wushuang never expected that he would provoke such a murder if he only stepped into the area of this borderless sea. Facing rank 3 Dayan Immortal is enough for Jian Wushuang today, but rank 6 Dayan Immortal may not be so optimistic. I'm afraid it will be a fate. But before stepping into this borderless sea, you have to fight for your life, and the road behind is probably even more impossible. It is Jian Wushuang's task to retain his best physical strength, facing such a giant beast. He also understood why Xiao Dijuan had prevented him from entering here before. What will be imprisoned in this so-called borderless sea, above the dark and thick sea? The behemoth raised 10 heads at the same time and let out a huge roar. Under this huge roar, Jian Wushuang felt a pause in his figure. That is to say, in this moment of effort, the giant beast suddenly opened its forelimbs and rushed forward with a strong momentum. The sky was shaking, and Jian Wushuang hurriedly released the ancestral technique. The gate of power reappeared, and a giant finger from the sky came down. However, the giant beast just raised his head and let an ancestral art fall on it. Boom! The sea is raging, igniting the waves of thousands of feet, and the ancestral art that grew with Jian Wushuang's growth fell on the monster, and it didn't stop for a moment. Unprepared, Jian Wushuang was suddenly knocked out of the distance. The clouds were plowed into a deep gully, and he had been marking 100,000 feet before he barely stopped his figure. Jian Wushuang was already solemn as he held back the blood churning in his heart. The strength of rank 6 Dayan Immortal was far beyond his imagination. Right now, this behemoth may be fighting with all its strength, and it will be very difficult. If it is consumed in this way, it is definitely not conducive to the next situation. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang felt a little irritable, reaching out his hand to take out a D-pin pill from his arms and stuffing it into his mouth to chew it. We have no grievances and no grudges, and we can't fight to the death. You can't help me for a while. How about letting me go? Facing the giant beast, Jian Wushuang tried to communicate. A total of 10 heads, 20 pairs of eyes looked at him together. Just as Jian Wushuang was preparing to fight, all the 10 heads of the giant beast actually spoke. The voice was hoarse and thick. "Deportee, what did you just eat?" Jian Wushuang was startled and soon understood the meaning of the giant beast's mouth. And then he directly stretched out his hand and took out a D-pin pill from his arms and raised it in the air. Suddenly, the extremely strong medicinal scent completely escaped in the air. Each of these Emperor Pill pills is an Emperor treasure that the Emperor Lu Crow collected in the past, and is the supreme quality. The medicinal scent that was so strong that it could not be repelled filled almost every inch of the sky. The giant beast also opened his eyes wide at this moment. "Guru!" The throbbing twitch of the stomach resounded everywhere, and it was obviously greedy to the extreme. "Here, give me—" Jian Wushuang heard this and smiled quietly. "Of course I can give it to you, but you have to let me go without any entanglement. I promise you." The giant beast's eyes were red, and it was salivating. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore. He directly bent his finger and shot the pill 1,000 feet away. In an instant, the giant beast also chased it out. He took advantage of this opportunity to fly and smash away. Feeling the disappearance of the sensational breath, Jian Wushuang secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and at the same time, he was a little dumbfounded. Just relying on a pill to flick a 6th rank Dynamortal is really incredible, but the smile on his face hadn't solidified yet, and a sound of breaking into the air resounded from behind him. Jian Wushuang hurriedly turned around and saw that the behemoth appeared again. "What are you going to do? Haven't you already said it?" he said condensely. Hearing this, the behemoth anthropomorphically smacked his mouth, then stretched out his huge forepaw and pointed to his head. "Anything else? I have 10 heads. One is not enough." Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. "Do you think I have a lot of pills of this level? The one I just gave you is the last one for me." He slapped his lips again, and the giant beast looked at him unwillingly, as if he was considering the truth or not. After a long while, the giant beast said, "Then you go, don't let me see you, and don't appear in my realm again." Jian Wushuang flew away directly, did not stop for a moment, and disappeared in an instant. And this time, the beast did not catch up. It lay on the thick sea, with 10 big heads thinking about something. It's really strange. How could such a weak exile be exiled here? Has he done too many terrible things before? The giant beast was thinking, and soon it dived directly into the dark sea, turned into a waterline, and marched forward. He kept flying over hundreds of millions of miles without stopping until he felt that there was no aura chasing behind him. Jian Wushuang let out a sigh of relief. The breath of rank 6 Dynamortal is too terrifying. If you continue to fight resolutely, I am afraid you will be seriously injured. Fortunately, he has completely escaped the control of that breath now. But Jian Wushuang did not relax his vigilance at all. He quickly found some pills that could cover his breath among the Emperor Pin pills he brought, and after swallowing them, he began to look at everything in front of him. The so-called sea without borders means seas with no margins. And right now, the thick and ink sea is like a mirror. I don't know where it extends, without any reference. Barren and dead.